Hey, what's going on, guys? Sanjelis represent for on the Great Pill Podcast, along with Classic Ruby. You can check her at I'll Be That News. Waiting on, there you go, perfect timing. Man, we're doing good today. We're doing good this Tuesday.
Hey now.
Da-da-da-da. All right, so we're going to have a conversation about autism. Just because, again, I don't know the conversation we had last week. I don't know. I'm not 100% aware of it. So we're going to do like a quick breakdown of it as we hear my man drink the last sip of the H2O.
Well, if we could just applaud Wes first and foremost for his sriracha shirt, because this is the only brand of sriracha that is just worth having. It's the greatest brand in life. So
obviously, American brand.
you know what?
All right.
I have nothing.
Fair enough. Let's get this last intro out. We keep it going.
So it's fine. Y'all can have one win.
Fair enough.
At last.
The king's back and the throne's mine. The future's here and it's my time. Straight shot, going for the head with it. Take his head off and say that I did it. Good riddance. Say hi to the bad guy, I'm back in business. If you took what's mine, I'm back to get it. There's nothing you can do, I'm back with vengeance. Now turn me loose. Now turn me loose.
For those that's listening out there in the YouTube universe, shout out to Great Pill Podcast. Go holler at him. Hell yeah. Give him a like and subscribe. Go view his channel, if you will. Courtesy of Classic Lights.
All right. Appreciate everybody for coming on through. Don TZ, appreciate you, good sir. Maribel, like always, thank you. Rude Mud Crap. Yes, this is a very interesting conversation. I wanted to have this for months, but I didn't know how to approach it. So we're just going to dive into it. I have so much ignorance with this conversation of autism. I thought it was just on a spectrum of kids, but it goes down. It's a lot of this. So we have that conversation. Appreciate you, Lady Nova, as always. Thank you. Yes. Right, like, huh? What are we doing? What are we having a conversation? Yes, we're gonna have that conversation and see what's developed. So stay tuned. Let me go ahead and bring everybody up here. Never letting that go. What's going on, Wes? What's going on, Ruby?
Aloha.
Hey.
Happy to be here.
I found some secret footage on West in them YouTube streets, man. I don't know if you knew about this, Ruby, so I got a confession. Me and West is hanging out in the weekends, and I know West don't like to party that much, but unfortunately I talked him into hanging out with me. We had a little bit of drink. So just for the live viewers out there, I just want to give this out here, disclaimer right now. I'm not much of a drinker, but me and Wes had a grand old time during the winter weekend because we never met up. So this is what happened. Okay, don't blame us. All right, don't blame us, don't shame us. Okay, we're just two grown men trying to live our high school years all over again. So stay tuned.
Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more.
على جبين سعادتي وأفكاري تجري الحروف بأشواق وأزداري.
All right, that's what happened. All right, there's a lot to unpack, okay? Meow, meow, okay? There's a lot going on that weekend. There's a lot of catnip involved. That's all I know. Somehow we had a lot. We used up all of our 8 lives. We left our last 1 life left, so we can get healed up quickly. You know, the bottom of the water, the dates, all the healthy, good stuff. So we made sure we're here on time. You know, so we had this conversation. Okay.
And we can repent and spend the rest of our last lives with Ruby here.
There's a lot going on that weekend, Ruben. That's all I'm gonna say. There's a lot going on. I don't know who started it. Could have been me. Could have been something West said. You know. He sometimes attacking it. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Catnip. That's all I'm gonna say. Shout out to
Nothing
Catnip.
to say. Mm-mm.
There's a lot going on that weekend, man. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Uh-huh.
You know how I be in them YouTube streets. I just go ahead, just air myself out now before
Pretty much. Yeah.
Throw it on the bus. He was bad. Oh man. So all right. So I'm gonna ask the ignorant questions because again, I don't know. So I'm gonna start with the ignorant question. What is autism? Okay, because again, I thought it started with children, and I want to do like a kind of like a rough draft, gradual conversation of it, so we can give like a full understanding. Oh, before I do that, I want to give an apology. I actually have do I have 2 apologies I want to give out? No, I have 1 apology, like serious conversation. I'd like to apologize to a Miss B. Taylor. I had posted something in my community wall. My intentions was to support and to I guess give like a round of applause. I didn't know a lot of her background except for I was doing homework on what's the brick lady, whatever the brick lady name is, Rhonda, whatever. I don't give a crap. The one that was scamming last time we talked about it, I think like a couple weeks back. So I did like kind of like a review of it, and then a link feed popped up in the news of the state that Miss B. Taylor resides in, I guess. So obviously she's very heavy in the media space. Like I have some friends here that actually be on. They're in the media. They got careers, got all this stuff going on. So I had posted on the community wall, like, hey, shout out to this person. This is what she does, blah, blah. She had respond to it, and she was kind of like questioning, like, hey, am I, is Grey Pill trying to dox her? Is Grey Pill trying trolling? And I was like, well, let me respond to this. So I respond to her. I think it was like Instagram, something else. And I said, no, that's not my intent. That's not what we do here. We generally attack the argument, unless you're like the main people like Pearl, Rolo, MLD. Like, I just don't give a crap about those guys, but we generally attack the arguments of conversation for the most part. We really don't attack the person. Like, like we could say, hey, look at Wes hair, look at his shirt, look at this. Like, we don't do all that dumb stuff. So, and I said, well, if you felt uncomfortable about it, it's not a problem. I'll just take it down, because she felt like any little information that people does, especially on one sector of YouTube, they will take that and run with it and try to do some weird little, let me try to find you, dox you, dive into your personal relationship. And I was like, I totally understand that. Don't worry about it. I apologize. Let me just go ahead and take it down. So it's taken down. So again, I just want to make sure I give her apologies for that, because that's not what we do over here. All right. Not at all. Some people take stuff to an extreme limit. Like, and I give an example, like Real Film Sapient Alley. I think she's an opportunist chick. First, per the interview that she had with Pearly Things, I think that she thinks she's very slick on how she maneuvers within YouTube spaces, because just because she don't show herself publicly hanging out with Pearl doesn't mean she's cool with Pearl. You know what I'm saying? And some other information come out how she another content creator went very, very low key low at a line I went across and pulled up a lot of personal information about her, a lot of personal information about Melanie King. And I'm like, it's certain lines I just went across. If I catch you, let's say, not really catch you, but if it's something you're openly saying on platforms, like, let's have that conversation. But if you're doing like some really dirty, underhanded stuff, I feel dirty myself just covering something like that. So that's just something I just don't do. But again, to Miss B. Taylor, apologize. That's not my intent. More success to you and whatever you do in your ventures in the future. And God bless. All right. So with that being said, autism. What is autism? Because I have no clue.
Okay, well, rude mud crab started it off. It is a nervous system neurological disorder, right? So it's both your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous
Your
system.
audio
It's
sounds a little bit
hmm?
cracked for some reason.
I'm crackling. Let's see if
I
maybe.
think you contracted it from Grey Pill, but he's obviously doing better.
Okay, how's that? Is that better?
Yeah,
Worse?
I
Better?
know you're what that one came at me. West came for me. It's about a mile away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're better.
Is better? Okay. So that's to let you know that this is not just like I don't know, people might think it's just like neurons misfiring or something. It's like no, it's actually affecting your entire nervous system. Um, and basically it's gonna count as two major things. In the according to the DSM-5, it's changed since the DSM-4. This is when I studied deeply early childhood disorders. So they are disorders that tend to present in early childhood. Autism is one of them. Now, according to the DSM-5, which is the most updated statistical manual, we're looking at two major components that people with autism are affected. One would be social interactions, as far as their social perceptions and communication, anything to do with socialization, their ability to read social cues, so on and so forth. And the second thing would be behavior, specifically like stereotyped behavior, which would be like repetitive behavior, repetitive wording, stuff like that. So that in general, you have now it says like autism spectrum disorder, there used to be a bunch of different disorders. There was like autism was to label people who were level 3. They were the people who were the most pervasively kind of affected, needed the most social supports, as most like assistance to live. And then you had, say, Asperger's disorder. That would be like level 1, people who could kind of live, but they were impaired. They could take care of themselves, but there's something a little bit off, right? And then there's a bunch of other types of disorder. There's sensory processing disorders and stuff like that. And now instead of those being individual disorders, they're kind of all on one spectrum. And so they call them autism spectrum disorders. So it's a bunch of different things down the spectrum you can be affected by one or multiple of them. And that will just dictate kind of how you perceive the world, where your shortcomings are as far as what you struggle with and whatever, also how much on a scale of 1 to 10 you can mask those struggles. So like me being level 1, for example, I'm very good at masking, which means I'm very good at kind of hiding my struggles, and people generally from the outside looking in can't tell how much distress or how much struggle I really go through on a day-to-day basis, because early in childhood I learned how to mitigate that and how to hide it from people. So it's not that I don't experience it, it's just that I'm good at hiding it from other people, right? And people who are level 3 tend to be worse at hiding it or incapable of hiding it.
Okay. Is there any examples of like when you say masking? Because I know last time I brought up a little bit like one individual. He was a guest on Speakeasy platform. I can't remember his name. Rude, if you can remember his name, let me know, bro. He was, doing a lot of rocking for the verbal combat. I made a joke, and then somebody was like, "Hey, he's autistic." I was like, "Whoa!" So it's like that was one sign that I recognized there. There's another woman from another platform. She was doing more of like a bouncing.
So it's
So is
called
there?
stimming.
Okay.
And most autistic people stim. Those of us who don't, it's because again, we learned how to mask. So we learn from
So
a
what is
very
stimming?
stimming it's something that I don't know how to explain it, but basically it's like, um, okay, so if you were to you from the outside looking in, you're seeing this person rock, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that rocking might not even be fully conscious for them, but it's giving them a sense of almost like you kind of feel warm and fuzzy and calm. And it's just like you're really fully engaged with your own internal world. So it's not something that like on the outside looking in, it looks weird to people, but on the inside of you're just engaging in your own private world. It's kind of I've always suspected that what it's doing is it's kind of silencing or dampening down your nervous system, which is kind of always over firing. And so it allows you to kind of silence a lot of that so you can be more at peace. And that's why you kind of feel warm and glowy and kind of comfy. But yeah, a lot of people, if you're higher functioning, right? So if you're like a level 1, level 2, you probably learned early on that you're going to be ostracized and hated and rejected if you do stuff like that in public. So you've learned how to not to do it in public, or learned how to do something that's less obvious, or less rejecting. So for example, y'all probably see I do this a lot, because it's a less obtrusive way. It's kind of like, it's not as fulfilling as what I
Mhm.
actually do, but it's a less obtrusive thing that I can do to kind of silence my nervous system, so I can just kind of think straight and speak calmly and whatever, right? So
Okay.
that's like the
What?
stereotype part of the stereotype movement thing that I said, where like you could have rocking, you could have flapping, you could have shaking of your limbs or whatever it is, right? Generally autistic people tend to stim. So
Okay. Wes, you have any comments or added information that you want to bring to the table? Because you have children, so I have a lot of questions.
So I'm familiar with it. I can give you, and I think I notice it more than most people, but I can give you an example of a couple of years ago. I worked for an employment agency for a little while, and um, my boss was interviewing someone. I was sitting in on the interview, and the person being interviewed, I could immediately tell that she was autistic. But at the end of the interview, my boss was like, "Did you see anything wrong with the interview?" I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" And she goes, "Well, she never looked straight at me. Like she kept blaming all the issues in her previous employment on other people, and she was laughing at very weird times." And I'm like, "Yeah, she has autism." And my boss was like, "What? What? Like I need to relook at those symptoms." But that's why it's such a that's why it's called a spectrum, because there's people with autism in ways to where they just absolutely cannot interact with the outside world, and there's other people that they can, but they're not aware of it. So I think there was a good possibility that the woman we were talking to was unaware that she had autism, because a lot of times when people have autism and they are aware that they have autism, and they're also aware that they cannot interact in normal means, they will actually let you know up front, hey, by the way, I'm autistic, because a lot of them have a hard time. Most of them cannot tell white lies.
Mm.
They
it's so
can't. They
true.
can't tell white lies. They're incapable of it. Some of them, if they tell a white lie, it's because they believe it. Like every time Ruby tells us she loves Canada, whatever.
You know what?
Yo, how that get in there?
Yeah, that was good. That was slick. That was slick. I liked it. Yeah, that was
Jesus.
good. You know what? It's so funny you brought up those two things.
Now her camera has it. Oh, I'm sorry.
I
That was
know
way too.
what
That
is
was
going.
that was, that
You
was
know why?
horrible.
Because I'm shaking. I'm not meaning to, but I think it's making me slightly uncomfortable / nervous to
Okay, there you go.
maybe talk about it more. So I'm doing my actual stimming. Like I said, it's a little bit more. It involves my
That's
whole
where
my whole body will vibrate. And so anyway, point is,
that's why I always make those weird jokes at awkward times, because it breaks all the tension. So
yeah,
from my
it's
perspective, it allows things to progress a little more when I do stuff like that.
I agree.
Fair
I
enough.
definitely agree. But yeah, like when it comes to the eye contact thing, right? A lot of these things, like most women, a lot of women, I won't say most, unless they are like a level 3. So if they're level 1, if they're high functioning, a lot of us, especially if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, we're not diagnosed until adulthood. And so the problem is because women present differently than boys do in general, right? So because little girls are socialized differently. So even though most even high functioning girls have an issue with doing the eye contact thing. It's actually one of the very first signs that you can see in babies, because babies' brains are trained to follow your gaze and to follow you pointing at something and whatever. And autistic children, very young ones, won't do that the way that other babies do, like because their brain is firing differently. And so, but because you socialize girls differently, you socialize them into doing certain types of things, plus their communication skills are slightly different. So they tend to be able to get away with it a little bit more. So unfortunately, there's a good chance that that girl probably had no idea. And she doesn't
Oh
know
wow.
why she's struggling so hard. And people don't know why she's struggling so hard. So she's probably having a really hard time at life and has no idea why.
Oh wow. Um, how can one find out if they have it? Just as a child up to adulthood. Like, is there ways we can just, because Wes is pointing out some ways that he just saw it, but I think because he was well trained and versed in that. So how can us now, like, okay, if we have a child, what signs to look for? How can we get tested? I seen like on a website there's like a little test app or something, but don't you normally have to go to a doctor for that?
Well, see, you can do the test. So actually, interestingly enough, a lot of women and girls were diagnosed after 2020. Everyone was home and people were starting to, I guess, become aware that girls, because I don't think people realize that like in the 90s and the early 2000s, people thought girls did not get autism. Um, and so it
Yeah,
was
I remember hearing that growing up.
right? So it was a thing. So a lot of girls were just struggling and, kind of put them into the I'm not like other girls camps and stuff like that. And then they found out about these kind of self tests or found a few girls talking about, hey, I'm autistic. And they would connect with it and like start crying and be like, wow, this explains every struggle I've ever had. And that's what led them to go to a doctor and to get a referral to get tested, right? So, you doing any type of test online to be like, oh, hey, am I depressive? Take this online quiz. That's not going to like actually diagnose you. You have to go to a professional diagnostician, but it could be the thing that leads you to look into it and say, hey, I should go see a doctor. Maybe I should be tested for this, right? For early childhood, even schools tend to do these referrals. They tend to do the testing for free, stuff like that. They have those resources available. For adults, depending what country you live in, they might not. So that makes it a little bit harder. Like in America, apparently they don't have the testing for free. Whereas in Canada, they do. It's a very
Mhm.
long waiting list to get into CAMH, but when you get there, they do have the testing for free. But if you at least are seeing a therapist, a professional who's used to working with autistic people, then at least you can kind of get a baseline, right? Like my therapist literally sat there and looked at me and went, your autism is so prevalent. It's like there's a whole second person sitting in the room with us at all times. And like
And
I
you're
have
both
no idea why no
wonderful.
one noticed before now. And I'm like, really? I wouldn't have thought so. No, yeah, like I didn't because I knew I was different, right? Like I knew I was different. Everyone knows I'm different. Everyone knows I'm weird. But I didn't realize that there was something that was that obvious. Like, you know what I mean? Especially given the fact that like I work in this field, right? You know what I mean? Like you would think
Mhm.
I would notice, but I had no idea. So
That's crazy. Wes, you had anything to add to that? That's a lot.
I just
Mhm.
threw in a very rare compliment and nobody acknowledged it.
I
what'd
did. I
you
was
say?
allowing her to
Let me
finish.
hear
I
it.
was not trying to get cursed out, sir, for not cut her off.
What'd you say? Sorry, I didn't hear.
You're gonna have to go back and rewatch the video now.
I heard it. He said you're both wonderful when you said it felt like the
Aw,
second person around. Yeah.
thank you. That's so
I
sweet.
love to hear what the therapist gotta say to me, what's going on in my noodle. Because boy, I might got 5 personalities going on. Just don't even know. Just don't even know. All right. So what about the kids? Like, is there like same thing? Like, so obviously kids is not gonna, 13 and below is not gonna be looking online for apps and stuff. Would that be more for the parents to like, let me keep an eye on my kids? Because there's a lot of parents is like, hey, the kid look normal to me. They get like 30, 40, 50 years old, then now they're realizing it that they have it.
Well, I mean, yeah, sometimes the parents are looking at things more often than not though. Like for example, like my parents literally telling my parents um like my mom for example a few years ago was met with a lot of resistance, right? Because not my baby, not my perfect brilliant, genius level and IQ baby. It couldn't be her. So a lot of parents are actually quite resistant, especially because again a lot of us were born and raised in the idea that girls don't get autism. Second of all, though, autism was this like life ending, you're not functional, you're probably have an IQ below 70. Like there was like a lot of huge stereotypes and that was all that represented autism. So, now the younger generations don't believe those things, right? The younger generations, and unfortunately that means though that you have with removing stigma means you have a lot of people who really want to be special who are pretending they have autism online, and they're pretending and they're doing a bunch of it's not a good look. It's definitely not a good look on TikTok in particular. You have a lot of people pretending to have certain things, so multiple personality disorders, autism, stuff like that, and that's not a good look. Definitely hurts all of us when people pretend that they have something that they don't for clicks and likes and views, right? So it's
Yeah, because I again, that's pretty much was even the whole grounded conversation for me because I knew of one person, seen them a lot of times before. It never came up, and then less than a year, they're just like, "Hey, I got it. I have autism." Like, really? I'm not. I want to ask them to like, flash an ID or the stuff they went through. I know they're in the States. Like, did you go through the steps of like, hey, let me go online to lead me to a therapist, a qualified therapist? Did you have like a paper? If there's like a ward, something for a plaque? I don't know. Like, all I know is just like, I don't know.
ask if they give you
award.
no.
Yeah. Like, hey, I have it.
I assumed there was a 12-step program.
Yeah, that's not. It's so crazy. I don't know.
Okay, so
Ruby
you
said,
have.
are we over
Hold on.
labeling?
So if you go for an official assessment, okay, there's 5 axes in your assessment, okay, and each one of those axes covers different parts of what your condition could be. So for example, something like major depressive disorder will be on axis 1, and then you have like major medical disorders could be, I think it's on axis 3 or whatever's major social environmental factors that come in could be at axis 5. I think it's axis 5. I can't remember because I'm not really a diagnostician, but the point is there's 5 different axes, and each one of those, some will have personality disorders, some will have psychiatric disorders, some will have your environmental factors, medical issues. And so basically you would be going in for multiple days, and you sit there and for like hours you're almost like being interviewed / quizzed in a way. And a diagnostician is writing down everything you're saying. You're being filmed, you're being recorded, you are in some cases you are answering like you're answering questionnaires. You don't know that you are. Sometimes you are answering questionnaires and you are, because you're filling them out yourself. And it's like days, a couple days of testing, right? And so they're testing you for particular disorders. Obviously, they're testing you, but they're also testing you for malingering, which is intentionally lying. And they're also testing you to see if you're maybe unintentionally lying. You're just really desperate to be special, for example. You see people do that. And so if you've gone in for an assessment, like a real one, you did. It's not something when people say, I went to my doctor and they went, oh my God, you're the most autistic person I've ever seen. That doesn't happen, right? Number one, your family doctor can't diagnose that. Only a psychologist can. And number two, that wouldn't be how they would do. Oh my God, you're just like so autistic. Wow, most autistic person I've seen here. Here's your medication for autism, and then like that's it, or like that's what you hear a lot of these fakers say, like something like that. It's obviously bullshit because that's not how that happens.
I agree. I have a link here. I think Wes might feel a little bit giddy for this one. So just a little bit of the stuff we touched bases on. So it shows here. Crap, it was like a little list. Okay. People also ask what are the 5 signs and symptoms of autism spectrum disorder. Pretty much a little bit of stuff we covered earlier. Little or no wobbling, little or no eye contact. Thank you. Showing more interest in objects and people. Appearing not to hear what's spoken to directly, playing with toys in a unusual or limited manner, repetitive movements with their fingers, hands, arms, or heads. And just for the gravy on top for Wes, there's one for Canada. So there you go, Wes. There you go. All right, and we also have, I guess, invited a few people for this conversation. There was one woman because she made a comment earlier. I didn't want to invite her because last time we talked, most people that's, I guess, on the higher spectrum of it, from what I understand, is they have like a set schedule for themselves. So I didn't want to mess up her schedule. Just like, hey, this is what we're talking about. You're more than welcome to invite it. And then her mind might wander in that. So I didn't want to send an invite, but I will send the link to her later. Just like, hey, what do you think about this conversation? So let me go ahead and bring up a guest up here real quick. There you go. Appreciate you, Darrell. Can you hear us, sir?
Peter out.
D. Darrell.
Hey, brother, how you doing, man? What's going on?
Not much, not much. I appreciate you, sir. If you'd like to introduce yourself and give you a little qualifications, all that good stuff, and what
Sure,
your channel
sure.
about.
Yeah. So my name is D. Darrell. I go by D. Darrell Spears. You can call me my full name, Dempsey Darrell Spears. I am a master's level clinician. I have owned my own mental health facility throughout the state of Texas, in Dallas, Houston, and in the Galveston County area, which is a suburb outside of Houston. For the last 15 years, I focus on children with behavioral disorders. I have branched out to handle things along with adults within the community. I do have experience working with autistic children, from the profound up to the mild level. I have worked and did government contracting with kids and adults who have been diagnosed with autism per se. So I wanted to bring my expertise as far as my clinical experience as a licensed clinician, as far as my observing of kids and the mental health process, as far as those who are diagnosed. Okay. I also wanted to kind of point out some of the issues that are going on with the field as far as the misdiagnosing of people with autism that I think has to be in consideration. And also the fact that there's a lot of, particularly on social media, people self-diagnosing themselves based on utilizing information from WebMD, Psychology Today, and other different mental health or counseling related sites in which they're looking at symptoms and they're not looking at the nuances that go into someone being diagnosed with autism. So the first thing that I would like to say, and I just want to introduce myself, but just kind of looking at things, is that the biggest problem that I see now as we change, because see, it used to be where back in the early, I want to say 2010, 2011, that was a disorder called Asperger's disorder. Okay. When they reformatted the DSM, they combined Asperger's disorder with autism, and they combined them together, and they created Asperger's, excuse me, spectrum disorder, which is basically kind of, because Asperger's is basically a milder form of autism per se, just in a simple form. And so as a clinician, many of the clinicians that I know from psychiatry, psychologists, most of the field disagreed with that. They at least from where the area I'm in, they didn't necessarily agree with that. They did not agree with the term autism spectrum disorder. They felt like there was no clear reason, even though some research showed, a lot of research showed that there was not a significant difference as it relates to people functioning with a milder form of autism and Asperger's disorder. It's kind of very closely related. And if you look at the DSM, I want to say 4 or 3 at the time, a lot of the symptoms, excuse me?
DSM-4 text revision.
Yeah, the DSM-4, a lot of the symptoms, the symptomology was closely linked. Okay. Now, my position is that when I see adults who have graduated from high school, who functioning, and to me, if you truly have autism, and I'm going to say this through all my years of working with children, I have over 20 years working with children.
Mm-hmm.
If that school is half decent, regardless of the lack of funding, I don't care where you're at, whether you're going to a school that's poorly funded or not, there will be identifiable markers that will occur that will present itself if a child is truly autistic. Before I'm gonna say at least the 2nd or 3rd grade. I have never had a client that was diagnosed with autism past the age of 10 years old.
Well, hold on, 2 questions, because you kept saying truly. So what do you mean by truly, not truly?
Okay, the reason why I'm saying that is because our mental health diagnoses is based on a professional opinion and what I say clinical impression. So there are people who get misdiagnosed based on using that system doesn't mean that if you go to one doctor, they may diagnose you with something, and then another doctor may diagnose you with something similar, but may not be the same. And so the reason why I'm saying truly is because I'm using it in a term to allow some level of the fact that there's human error. Okay, because the way one doctor may see one thing, another doctor may see it the same way, but may not as significant as the other.
So you're saying not 100%, but if the percent is 75% or higher, wouldn't that still be justified as that person still has autism? Because again, we mentioned earlier, there's like spectrums, not just autism. There's like, hey, I think we mentioned like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's levels to it.
Yeah, that is again from profound up to mild. But see, the issue with that is that if a kid truly has autism, I'm going to say 95% of the time, they are going to be diagnosed with autism before they leave elementary school. It's very difficult. And I'm saying this clinically speaking. I have never seen a child that was diagnosed with autism get diagnosed with autism in middle school or high school. I've never seen it in 20 years. And I don't know.
The problem is you only work
with
hold
on. No, I don't. I work with adults too.
Didn't you just say you work with
No, I did not. I did not say that. I said I began my career working with children. And as I progressed since 2008, I started working with more adults, and I work with children and adults. I'm going to be honest. I see at least, I would say 3 to 5 adults that are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder a year. Most of them are highly functional. That 25 years ago, they wouldn't have been diagnosed with autism. They would have been diagnosed with Asperger's disorder. And that, and that didn't come from me. That came from the psychologists and the psychiatrists who I worked under in interdisciplinary settings before I went into business for myself, who told me this. So I'm basically not just speaking from myself, but I'm also speaking from experience as it relates to people who are actually in the field itself are more qualified and who actually diagnose and they have more experience and education than I do in this particular syndrome or diagnosis.
So in your expert experience, so what age? Because you said there's a certain age is like when they get out of a certain school, they're like, I guess like growing out of it. Is that what you're saying?
You don't grow out of autism. It's okay. This is something that what I'm stating is that it is highly unlikely. And I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it's highly unlikely for a kid that truly has autism to all of a sudden find out they have autism when they're an adult or they are in high school. And that's what I'm saying. It's highly unlikely. I'm not saying it's impossible. Yeah. I say it's based on my experience and others. I've never seen it before. And see, this is not the first time I had an argument about autism in itself, because I did a video about this on my D-Derail Life Solutions. And I had a whole autism community that was upset with me because I told them that self-diagnosing themselves with autism is not an official diagnosis. And it's not.
Well, that I can agree with, because we all said that self-diagnosis is not a thing. It's pretty much, if we're going the self-diagnosis way, like I said earlier, if I saw an app or if I saw a website, even Ruby said, hey, that's one way to kind of direct you in the right direction to seek the help that you need for yourself. After that, we gave I think she mentioned 2 doctors and ways to how to get that. Even that, again, I gave a percentage for myself, 80% or higher, to kind of lead you in a better direction of just to weed out the people. Hey, if you claiming that you have it, like somebody said earlier in the chat, some people like to lie just for the I've seen it on YouTube themselves, hey, I got this illness so people can feel empathy for me, people can pity me, super chat, and then people the professional doctor will weed that out to say, okay, well, you just lying, you just want that title just to be that type of person. Now, since we weeded that out, let's actually focus on what exactly going on to the realm of your disorder, and then we could take it from there. So I'll give to Wes. So Wes, if you have any thoughts or comments, and then Ruby.
Oh, well, think my theory behind autism spectrum. Yeah, you turned off the wrong thing when you did that.
There you go.
So my theory is that it's toxins being stuck in the brain and the nervous system at very early years of development, because autism has not been around. Autism has not been around the way it is now, the way it could have been around 80 to 100 years ago. And with this, well, the reason why it's such a spectrum, why there's so many different implementations is the wrong word, so many different expressions of it, how it's affecting the nervous system, is because it's all about how the human body is trying to overcome these toxins at such a young age, being bombarded into the nervous system and brain development. And I would call it a lot of short circuits that the body is trying to work around. But I ultimately believe it comes from very poor food system, lots of industrial products being used,
Processed foods.
process being used in food and water being passed down from parents, things that are overloading our systems, and that's why so many young children get this at such a young age. But that's my own meandering thoughts on that.
I agree. Every time it comes to just processed food or just toxins in your food, fast foods, everything has like an effect to your body. I definitely agree with that. Ruby, your thoughts?
Okay, well, first I want to speak to that girl and why there are 3 levels. You are correct.
Okay, I
And so
apologize.
that's okay. Level 1 would be like, say, Asperger's, right? That's the more mild disorder, right? And level 3 would be the more pervasive disorder, right? The one that needs the most assistance, and would for sure be diagnosed at a very early stage. They used to believe, again, like I said, back when I was in grade school, they believed that generally girls didn't get autism, and if they did, it was only level 3. It was the most pervasive, the most severe. Right. And it's because, again, your ability to communicate, right? Your ability to say, for example, use melodic speech would be a key element, right? And so, because girls are socialized differently, because their brains work slightly differently, they often can do that. Even though they're level 1 or level 2, even they often can do that. And so, when you're working in a system that already doesn't believe that you could be autistic, then what ends up happening is, despite all of the autism signs screaming in your face, you are being evaluated and you are creating a problem with a capital P. And I went to very we'll say high class, like really high attention type of school. And like at one point they were investigating my parents. I think it was second grade, first, second, third grade, around then, because it was like there's got to be something wrong with her, right? Maybe she's being abused, maybe whatever. This is not normal. She has a genius level IQ, right? She's a very sweet girl sometimes, and then sometimes this happens, and they have no explanation for this behavior. And so they're thinking, well, okay, kids only act out like that if they're being abused at home, or if this, or if that, right? But unfortunately, obviously, none of that was true. I wasn't. I mean, I was being like my parents were really being investigated by like social workers were coming to the house and stuff. Like, they actually had a separate social worker at the school for years in my grade school, just for me, for the problem that is Ruby. No one quite solved it, unfortunately. But it was actually me speaking about that and just very specifically kind of outlining some of the issues in the first, second, third grade, and my perceptions or misperceptions socially is actually, I was having a discussion much like this, only with a different therapist, and they asked me after the conversation had been over if I had ever been evaluated for ASD. I'm like, no, not me. So that was actually, and that was 5 years ago. And so from there, I was like, no, that couldn't be me. I appreciate what you're saying. And so, well, just take a look at the information again. Listen, I'm a researcher, right? In psychology, neuroscience, and behavior. I would know, and it's not me. So that's where I started, right? So on one side, I'm going to have to disagree with Dee Durrell, especially when we're talking about girls in particular. But I think there's a part of me that does agree with Dee Durrell to say that you would have symptoms, and all of your symptoms would be present from early childhood. Right? They just might not be understood as what they are, right? So there's a lot of people, a lot of women who were not diagnosed when they were younger, and again, they did very stereotypical stimming. They had really stereotypical PDA type responses or whatever, but they were always thought to be, it must be something else because why girls don't really get autism. And so, you know, if Dee Durrell is from a place that 20 years ago was already in the know, and you're like, no, actually, it's pretty equal, the prevalence of autism in girls and boys. That's awesome, right? But many of us, me being included, were not in an area where that was even remotely common thought, which certainly wasn't common in the research to make that statement 30 years ago. So, and that's where a lot of people fell through the cracks and didn't get a diagnosis earlier in childhood, is because of those prevailing beliefs that were against girls having autism to begin with.
Fair enough. Darrell, you have anything to respond to that, or
Yeah, I'm just going to be honest. I've never heard anything in regards to, even though I will say that when it comes to the diagnoses of autism, just like some other disorders, there has a tendency for males to be diagnosed or misdiagnosed with certain illnesses, and I would say to some effect, boys showing certain behaviors and certain markers would draw the attention of that.
what would be some of these markers and behaviors for men or boys?
They would be consistent with the symptoms of what the DSM says, as far as the sensory, as it relates to smell, as it relates to being nonverbal or difficulty being verbal, hyperactivity to a certain extent, just a lack of understanding not verbal, but social cues. But I don't see a significant.
Crap, that's like 80% of the red pill manosphere. Then what are we talking about?
No. I'm talking about. I'm looking at DSM. I don't know anything about that, but okay.
You said social awareness. I'm like, okay, I thought we was going somewhere with that.
No. That could be something else. You understand? They are differential diagnoses where certain symptoms can be similar to others. So that could be a lot of other things, you know. But this is, and I've known Classic Ruby for a while. Okay. And as I'm hearing Classic Ruby talk about her own experience, okay, and I'm listening to her own experience, what could be different from somebody else's experience. And I'm not saying she's not correct, and she is stated she's a behavioral nurse, psych nurse per se, training, you know, we train in
psychology, neuroscience, and behavior.
Okay. Neuroscience and behavior researcher. Great. And so I see this a lot in the field, Grey Pill, and this happens to clinicians too. And as a person who has produced and has taught and supervised well over 100 therapists, particularly in our community, most were mainly, I say 80% were women. 20% were probably men, and then I produced, you know, I've taught as a supervisor. There are a healthy percentage of people who come into the field who have some level of mental illness or some form of diagnosis. And one of the main problems that I encountered is that, and this is something that a psychologist that I worked under, who made me more aware of this as I would go to him as far as mentorship and so on, is that there was a tendency for people who were diagnosed, whether they had major depression, any type of, you know, major depression, bipolar disorder, or a personality disorder, they would some way take in the information and the education that they received and understanding their own illness, and they would project that into their patients. They would project that into other people. They would project that into an understanding that may deviate from, because there's still, even though you're looking at things and you got the information, that there's a level of subjectivity that kicks in and biasness because you're looking at merely your experience.
Okay, you talking about the doctor diagnosing the patient?
No, I'm talking about the clinician, whether you're, no matter what level, as a mental health professional, period, who has a illness, mental health illness, and particularly in their training or things that they're doing, there is instances that have occurred, and I've seen this happen repetitively, where, again, if you're diagnosed with something, you start seeing your clients through yourself and start giving them diagnoses or saying that they have things and things that relate to you.
Yeah,
or
but
saying,
that sound like a weird, screwed up doctor, and then at the same time,
I'm not.
it's like,
I'm not gonna say they're
properly.
weird. No, I'm not gonna say they're weird. I think that's a poor choice of word. I just think that
fair.
Okay, but what I will say is that they are in some way still learning their own journey, and it's hard for them to departmentalize themselves from their profession. And so
the doctors.
No, not only doctors. I said mental health professionals, period. That goes for researchers, psych nurses, behavioral techs, therapists, social workers.
So that way I'm like diagnosing.
No, I didn't say that.
Really have, even though I didn't diagnose.
I didn't say that.
Nor do I work in this area.
I didn't say that. Did you say that?
That's what you're intimating.
No, that's not what I'm intimating.
I'm autistic, not an idiot.
I'm basing things based on clinical experience.
Mm-hmm. But again, you're trying to apply it to me.
This has nothing to do with my opinion. My opinion means nothing.
Why you added in research?
No. Listen, I'm being consistent with the DSM-5 TR.
Okay, well,
I have. This is no personal in anything, but what I'm telling you, as a person who has trained, particularly therapists, I've had contracts with U of H. I've had contracts with Texas A&M. I've had contracts with University of Texas. I have trained professionals that were psych nurses working at my facility, which is an intensive outpatient program. I also provide case management, all different types of services. I have my company has a vast amount of services that it provides to the community. And it's attractive to students who are in training. And so some of these students, and even the professors that work for me, have had a propensity to see the client through themselves. Matter of fact, one of the classic examples I had is if I had a white female therapist who was diagnosed with PTSD about 10 years before she decided to become a therapist. Every client that she saw, she had a caseload of about 20 people. Every last one of those clients, when we had a treatment, she said something as it relates to PTSD that was not conducive to the behavior of that client. And some of these clients had, reputable, bona fide diagnoses, and she, for some reason, linked that. And so we had to do one-on-one sessions of looking at, legitimizing the fact that, the current diagnosis is not relative to what you're saying based on what you're thinking and what you're feeling, based on some issues and work that you need to do for yourself to separate yourself from your client. And listen,
but wouldn't that be a problem with that? Again, with that physician though, that's one person.
No, you're saying no. We're not talking about. I'm not just talking about physicians. I'm talking about all levels of as far as profession. I'm talking about psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, social workers, behavioral psych nurses, researchers, behavioral techs, and other direct care staff. I'm talking about period. I'm talking about.
So how would I go about looking and vetting through these different type of professional people? How can people
as a client, as a future client? Okay.
Yes.
So for and I've actually done videos on this and looking for a licensed clinician. Okay. Looking for a licensed therapist. And so what I would say, I've separated it out based on the highest to the smallest. Let's say you're a person who, let's say you're suffering from anxiety, you're suffering from depression, you have signs in which your symptoms in itself are hindering you from working, hindering you from socializing, you're not taking care of yourself physically like you once was. Let's say you're in risk of losing your job, you become somewhat suicidal or things of that sort. Like say things that are really, really hindering your ability to function and do everyday things that you typically would do, to the point where you're isolating yourself or it's being noticeable to other people. In that sense, I would say you may need some medication, and the only profession within that can provide that is a psychiatrist. I would say you need to go to a psychiatrist, and in conjunction to you going to a psychiatrist, they're probably going to refer you to seek a psychologist or a master's level therapist to provide psychotherapy for you. That's typically. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, but because I'm pretty much like, you know, the lame corny guy that like basic. So where do I go exactly to get the help I need? Because, you know, I might self-diagnose myself like, hey, maybe I got autism. I don't know. So where would I need to go to find a professional? And also, how would I need to vet this person out? Because you said consistently, there's people that will see themselves in me. They might love me, like, yo.
Well, but again, that's not average. That's a small minority. I'm just using that as an example of situations in which that occurred. The average therapist is not walking in here doing this type of thing. But I'm saying that there are examples, and
so how do we weed them out? How do we vet?
So within you vetting, okay, a lot of therapists will, particularly like if you're using a mental health resource, or you can call your insurance, you can go on Psychology Today or any other counseling or mental health related. You can go to the ACA, you can go to the American Psychological Association, and also the American Association for Social Work. You can find and get an array of information that they can provide you that can so you can make the best choice for yourself. Now, in you contacting the particular private practice or agency or wherever you choose to get your treatment, the first thing I would tell you to do is look at their credentials, okay? And once you look at their credentials, look at their expertise as far as the modalities that they provide, and also the list of specialties that they have that relates to your issues. Let's say you're coming in because you are finding that you're seeing or hearing things. Let's say you have some level of psychosis, okay? If you look at that person's page or that person's information, if they don't say something as it relates to psychosis related disorders or schizophrenia, things of that sort, then if they don't say that, then that may not be the type of therapist you need, okay? But if it does say that relates to you, then that would be somebody that you may want to call and talk to them about, because they actually have experience treating that type of client per se. So that's the first part. Now, once you get to the next phase of calling them, setting up a consultation, they may give you a 15-minute consultation. I'm just tipping, some don't. You know, for me, myself, I may do a 15-minute consultation over the phone. I don't do because I don't do consultations face to face anymore. I kind of stopped doing that. But in a consultation, that's your opportunity, Grey Pill, to ask questions, to see if you'll be a good fit, to see if they are exhibiting behaviors that you find uncomfortable, you know, because there is a such thing as transference and countertransference, which relates to how you see them or how they see you. That person may remind you of somebody you don't like, or you may remind them of somebody. That could be something where you're just not gelling correctly within the initial therapeutic process. So you have the opportunity to ask questions, to observe what you're seeing, and see if you can be comfortable in the therapeutic process of gaining treatment and developing coping skills or whatever your goals are within your treatment plan to get where you need to be. You know, so that's what I would advise someone to do if you're trying to vet to get the right person.
And that's 15 minutes of a
person.
Well,
it all depends. It all depends on 15. Usually some may do 30 minutes. I'm going to say 30 minutes. You can do a 30-minute consultation per se.
And they'll figure out within 15, because I'm
no, they're not figuring. No, listen, that's you seeing if you're comfortable with the person. They're not going to figure anything out in 30 minutes. Okay. That's just for you to choose. That's more for you, not for the therapist. That's for you to determine if I want to continue the therapeutic relationship.
And then they're going to reschedule. Then they're going to reschedule another time to like see me even more.
Yeah. Yes. They're going to schedule to see you again. Now, in most situations, we're looking at the assessment phase. Now, for me, when I see a client, and I kind of saw it when she kind of talked about, depending on who you see, like a psychologist may want to do a full battery examination on you or something like that. They could be 4 to 5. They're going to do a battery of testing. Some do different. For myself, I may do a mental status exam, and I may do what's called a psychosocial assessment that may take an hour and a half to 2 hours, in which I will highlight and ask you a host of questions that would detail your whole life up into the present, in which we will talk about things as it relates to your education, your schooling, any social issues with family, medical issues that can induce or affect your mental illness, things of that sort. We're going to ask whether or not you've had a criminal history, any violent tendency. It's going to ask a whole host of questions that involve your whole life. And in that, along with any other information, like say if you've seen another therapist or someone else, we can take that mental health history and make a determination of how we're going to formulate your treatment. Okay, it's that assessment phase. Depending on who you see, it could be kind of lengthy. And then after that, once that person decides, and she mentioned it could take 1 or 2. They can actually spread it up into 2 days, multiple days. That's true. That can happen depending on the situation, depending on what's going on with you, the extent, the severity of it, and your functional level. It's not necessarily about the diagnosis, it's how you're functioning with the diagnosis. Some people function, better than others. It all depends on the situation. So with that being said, once that treatment plan is made for yourself, once that the therapist gets a kind of a snapshot of who you are and based on what you present, the information that's collected, they're going to create a treatment plan for you. And then they're going to go about this, implementing whatever therapeutic techniques or school of thought that they typically use, and they're going to utilize that to help you with whatever issues that you have.
All right, fair enough. Wes, okay. Ruby, there's a lot, Wes. You have anything, Wes?
I was thinking for a moment, trying to interpret all that. There's obviously a lot that goes into trying to diagnose.
Yes, it does.
Autism. But that's always been kind of baked into the cake, since it's it's spread apart, and that goes back to what how Ruby opened it, saying that a lot of times girls were being underdiagnosed, while boys were easily diagnosed because they're raised differently. But also, a lot of people viewed autism as debilitating. They didn't realize that there was non-debilitating. I can't find the right word. I keep wanting to say the word implementation.
Like
levels. Yeah, non-debilitating levels of autism. So I can see why it takes so long, or why a regular doctor is not capable of making those determinations.
Well, the reason why a doctor can't just make that off a clear observation is because it presents differently with different people, based on your age, based on your environment. There's also environmental factors, there are genetic factors that contribute to that. So I would be very suspicious of a doctor that saw a kid for 30, 45 minutes or whatever, and just give them a quick diagnosis of autism. That to me is that was poor services. That was actually a poor exercise of his profession. A battery of testing, such as the autism quotient, there's several assessments that are used. And I'm also not only just the assessment itself, but you also got to look at the behavioral observations that are taking place in the home environment and in the school environment, or whatever our environments that child is operating in. You also have to take into account what you're observing. So it's extensive, and it should be, because you don't want to just slap a diagnosis on somebody and it's wrong, or you put it. And I've seen tons of misdiagnoses, tons of it. I've seen kids misdiagnosed. Ruby talked earlier about people malingering and things of that sort. That happens. And I'm gonna be honest, a lot of psychologists usually ignore that. And I actually had issues with a guy that I worked with that actually was a partner of mine before we actually, kind of went away. But I was doing Social Security assessments and I was mainly doing Social Security assessments for people who had a mental illness or they were being evaluated. We were doing a full battery exam. We were doing all of that. And we were doing objective testing. The psychologist did he did the projective testing because as a master's level clinician, we're not allowed to do the projective stuff, the interpreting stuff. But I clearly told him, I said, hey, this kid, I think he's pretending to be sick or to have an illness en route to getting these benefits. And a lot of clinicians, they overlook that and just say, we just want you to report what you observe. Just report what you observe. Do not question. And I don't know that's, as a psychologist, that's maybe how they're trained. I know, as far as my training, it was kind of similar to that, but they just say, just report what you are told. Just you ask them a question, just document the answer. Don't go into the question. Don't go into changing up your body position, facial expressions, things of that sort, because that can kind of alter how they feel when you're asking it. Like, just report what you hear.
Not if you gaslight them.
Well, I can't gaslight in an assessment. That's predetermined questions.
Okay.
Yeah, uniform questions.
Okay. What about silly question? What about genetics? Is that a genetic thing? Like, hey, I have it. Okay.
Yeah, genetics can play a big role. And I'm gonna say this is another thing, and this is one of the biggest. I almost stopped providing services to autistic kids, particularly children. And I actually had an issue with a medical doctor in regards to this. And so I'm gonna say this: when I first entered the field of counseling and mental health, there was not a large population of autistic children. It wasn't. Something happened between 2003. No, I'm gonna say 2000, somewhere around 2000 to 2008. There was a huge projection of more kids being diagnosed with autism. In the 80s and 90s, from what I've gathered from professionals that are older and have more experience, there were not a lot of kids diagnosed with autism. And maybe there should have been more because maybe the assessment and appraisal tools were not there yet. Maybe the training for it was not up to par.
Or it could be a lack of awareness of parents too, because I don't want to say back in my day, but I just remember the 70s, 80s, and 90s. We had, like, even the technology and media itself, like we didn't have a lot of access to a lot of things. So it was more like, hey, we just get outside, play. So in my upbringing, the message was the kids was out of sight, out of mind. So the parents was happy. If they knew their kid was hanging out with the neighbor next door, the parent were like, okay, well, I'm at work from 9 to 5. I'm good because I know I assume that kid is good. Now, if the kid come home, I think Ruby mentioned earlier, like if the kid got good grades, hey, the parents like, oh, I did my job. The kid got A's. Nothing, no muss, no fuss. If the kid was like, because I feel like and I'm pretty much that when I said this a lot, so I'm guilty of this. I self-diagnosed myself as OCD. Like I like to have stuff in order. If I go to an aisle, I'll put stuff this way. I have my house like so in the order where I can have my eyes closed, walk in my closet, pick out things to wear. Like I know in order where my shirts, right, long sleeves, short sleeves, color, everything else, right? So right. It just feels like a lot of parents in those times, 70s, 80s, and 90s, even the early 2000s, a lot of parents didn't care too much of put too much attention on their kids, as long as they had good grades, as long as the kid was fed, as long as the kid just had the basic necessities. I heard parents say this back in the day, as long as they had the basic stuff they need, requirements, they don't care about anything else. So anything going on inside their head and their heart, kids just do whatever. Then by the time they're like 20s and 30s, something happens, like, oh, I didn't know this, I wasn't aware. He or she always got like straight A's. Oh, he or she was in a college honor roll, cheerleader, football squad, all this stuff. And then I didn't know this. It's like, okay, well, here's all the reports and the diagnosis of the child right there. So, and that becomes problematic too. So for every time I hear a kid, when it comes to children, I always look at the parents first, like, hey, was you aware of your kid? And then at the same time, the parents could be so close to the kids, they might not even be aware. Like, yo, I have my kid all the time. I'm looking and watching them. That child might give me eye contact. Then next to know, something shifts later on. The kid is doing something else,
because you're the mother, or because, and what happens a lot also is that even parents will notice, right? Like now in retrospect, right? My mom, like sometimes she'll cry. She feels really bad because she's like, I wish I had put things together appropriately, but she didn't. What she would do is she would explain things away, right? So like my lack of, I'll say appropriate levels of eye contact, because I would either make no eye contact or then remember I'm supposed to be making eye contact and make way too much eye contact, right? So like, and my discomfort with people making eye contact with me on a normal level and stuff like that, it's like you might be like, oh well, she's just always thinking about stuff because she's just her head's in class, or she's just a heavy thinker, that's all, that's why she's not looking directly in her eyes, or oh well, she's just distracted today, oh she just had a lot of sugar today. It's like it's really easy as parents to try to find an alternative explanation, especially if your kid overall is doing well, like you said, in certain areas, right? So like again, I had like a really high IQ. I was not doing well in school at all, but I had a very high IQ. Um, and I had moments of brilliance in school at least, but I was not doing well generally. But the thing is I was a black kid in an almost entirely white neighborhood in a pretty much entirely white school, and my parents were very young, and so they were very afraid of me being labeled, and then that taking away opportunities I got because of the good label. I already had a good label. They didn't want the good label, right, genius, to be overridden by something that everyone basically associated with, like, subpar levels of IQ. It's almost like the two things would cancel each other out. And so I think because of those fear levels, anyone mentioned, especially in the 90s, right? In the 80s and the 90s, someone mentioned something like that about your kid, there's no way, especially in a place like this, because you did see a lot of the 2% of black kids falling through the cracks, or being I want to say misdiagnosed or judged unfairly, labeled unfairly, when you know they just needed like a tiny bit more help than maybe some other kid or whatever. And it's just like, and we were in French immersion also, which kind of made it difficult because it meant that a lot of things that maybe socially you might be able to pick on from reading stories or whatever, my parents wouldn't be able to do because all of my stories were in French. Everything I was writing was in French. They weren't, it was on the teacher to care. So if the teacher doesn't care, and the teacher doesn't pick up on it, because the teacher has already stereotyped you as being a black kid who is a problem, because black kids are problems. That's what's wrong with them. They have behavioral issues because they're black. Especially if you're in an all white school with a bunch of French people. I'm so serious. So I think there's a lot of challenges sometimes to, I will say, black children in particular, especially in demographics like what I was born and raised into, getting not just the proper diagnoses,
Also
but
low class. I want
proper,
to throw it in there too. Low class also.
yeah, low class as well. But I'll say low class, everyone is just not getting the proper support and proper diagnoses and proper aftercare and whatever, right? In my school, like I said, they pulled out all the stops. They had money to have a social worker in the school to watch me for years. Just me. I was the problem, right? So that's how much money this school had, right? But at the same time, it's like, if I was a white kid who had a genius level IQ and was really sweet and da 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 da, and then there was just these times sometimes that I would react in a way they just didn't understand, and my reactions were really, really big. And if you listen to what I was saying, it was a very strong sense of, I felt like I was like, there's a strong sense of justice in there, right? I felt like you were really just doing something wrong, and I just felt like it was unfair, and I didn't understand why it was happening. And whatever. If someone had heard me, and if I was like a little white kid, they might have, right? But because I was a Black kid, they had already decided. I have young parents who, my mom was a teen when, I was born, and my young parents were already separated, and I was in a neighborhood where everyone's parents were still together, right? Except for the other Black kid in my class who also had a single mom. My parents were both raising me, but they were apart. And so they had all these things they could blame it on, right? I'm a problem because I have teen parents who are Black, and and this is how Black people are. I mean, come on, look at them. Most of them are in the ghetto anyway. These are the things that were really happening, right? And so these are the stereotypes that a lot of people are fighting. And so my best friend, her son was born at 24 weeks. He was like literally like this big. It was insane. And all through his early childhood, he was just, they tried to label him, put him in the special school constantly, right? He's like 11 now, and still, and it's like you have to fight constantly against it, because as soon as a Black child in particular shows the littlest bit of deviation from what you're hoping they do or what you're expecting them to do, or they don't try to find another explanation for why this kid trusts every single person in this room like they're all equal, right? Let's just label them with ADHD. Let's just label them with autism. Let's just label them with something. And then there you go. That's our excuse to throw them away somewhere, right? And so you see that a lot happen also. So I do think that we did have, especially in the Black community, we did have a lot of over labeling of Black boys, right? But while we were over labeling Black boys, we were misdiagnosing Black girls often as well. So I think there are a lot of issues. I think either way, though, being somewhere like Canada helps, because we have socialized healthcare, right? Free healthcare, for lack of better words, right? We also have a systemic way of dealing with things. So it's not on individual therapists, right? Individual practitioners to diagnose people. In fact, you can as an individual practitioner, but then your responsibility as an individual practitioner is to send them to, like, say, for example, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, or that's a big hotel downtown Toronto, and whatever, and for them to get an official assessment, an official diagnosis, right? Like I said, the 5 axes, I was talking to you guys about that. And so there's a standard, right? So it's not just on one person, on some school psychologist to diagnose your kid, or, this random place to diagnose your kid. No, like there's a really systemic standard that, they uphold, and they do that by kind of taking the, thousands and thousands of people who are psychiatrists or psychologists or therapists, like, no, there's a standard over here, and you've got to send your kid over here. You got to send your teen or your adult over here to get an official diagnosis. And that if your kid gets that diagnosis, if you're as an adult, you get a diagnosis through somewhere like CAMH, then that your symptomology is in line with other people who have that diagnosis. And there's no way that bias could have come in there to play like a role to say label you, or systematically try to label you something have or whatever. So
fair enough, because that was pretty much my mindset. I know Darrell was saying his experience, it just be a couple of, hey, what's going on, Mandrell? Appreciate you, Mandrell. Thank you for coming through. Literally threw me off. I was gonna go ahead and welcome WG, and that's Wes. I swear, I hate you. Yeah. Hey, what's going on? Not sure, Ashley. Oh, shout out to Ashley. Well, actually, Ashley and Sarah's like two peas in a pot. So when I say Ashley, I also say Sarah. So shout out to Sarah too, because she was doing her live, so her first time live ever. Yeah, so it's going on at the same time. We got to coordinate. We're all in the same little bubble. We got to coordinate, okay? Get this sucker popping. Because I was so proud of her. She got 1,000 subscribers not too long ago. I knew she had to watch us because, boy, she'd be streaming nights. I knew she had it. So congratulations to her for that. Sarah popping her chair for the live streaming. So I don't know how long. Do you know how long she's going to run her live stream? Because I was planning to just hop over there and say hello. Yeah, definitely 1,000. So if she has still live and we're still active, I'll definitely hop on there to say hello. But she's definitely said she's gonna close it after stream. She's giving it a test. Oh, she's done? Okay, cool. She's more than welcome over here for the conversation. Oh, okay. That's what's up. Yeah. So back to the topic. So yeah, I'm with Ruby on this one because like I don't want it to be like I know you're saying like it is me. Maybe I'm Southerner because when a lot of people us Southerners do a lot of big words and wordplay, it's like I don't know. Is this guy? Is it this is
I'm
situation?
Southern too.
Is it sus? Is it very sus? I gotta keep my eye on the words a little bit because that's why I asked directly, like just for the regular smuggler guys like myself, like and well let's jump on this one because Ruby was saying earlier, and she's standing on the point of women have different brains and how they're biologically we're different than men and women. I know in a lot of spaces we all would agree on this one. Men and women are different, right? So just on the aspect of the brain development and when it comes to autism, how different are men and women, Darrell? Because there's a lot of stuff I was looking into. I couldn't really pinpoint it. A lot of people were just explaining just the behaviors.
Mhm.
Obviously, I'm not buying a purse. You know what I'm saying? So, what exactly is the behaviors between men and women that we can say, hey, these are little differences that behaviors men and women have that kind of help you identify a person with autism? Also, Mandrell, if you're there in the chat, sir, you're more than welcome to come up for the conversation. So, there you go. That part.
That's a very dicey uh, topic as far as looking at gender differences.
Well, anything in your
But
experience,
but my experience, I didn't see significant gender differences.
Okay.
I seen the waving of the hand, the gestures. They all were the same. Now I seen, to me, what I did see, it was more intense for the boys than the girls, but it was pretty much the same things. I didn't see
Intense in what way? Like West holding his chin?
like the boys were probably a little bit more aggressive than the girls were. The girls were probably a little bit more stationary. As far as the wave, do the waving of the hand or some repetitive gestures, pretty much the same. I just seen the boys do it a little bit more aggressive.
Okay.
What I have found is that as far as being nonverbal autistic children, I've seen that more prominent in boys than girls. Things of that sort, as far as the nonverbal or as far as the verbal, the girls were more verbal on average. I've seen that, but other than that, I never seen like the overall within the context of the features that make up autism spectrum disorder. They exhibited pretty much the same things. It's just that the boys were probably a little bit more intense and physical with things, than the girls. And I want to ask, like, have you ever heard of applied behavioral analysis, ABA therapy?
No.
Okay. ABA therapy is a lot of observation and implementation of behavioral strategies and things as far as the observation and repetitiveness of different things, looking at the sensory and things of that sort to try to help them function in their environment. I'm not an expert on that, on ABA therapy. I've had some, as far as the education, as far as me being clinically supervised to do it, I never really did it. I did a lot of behavioral therapy, which is a little different. ABA therapy has a lot more structure and time-related things that involve that behavioral therapy doesn't have. So I don't want to go, but I threw that out as for those who are listening, just for educational purposes. And part of what we spoke of as far as how people looked at things from the 70s, 80s, and 90s is basically a lack of psychoeducation, which is a problem in our community. There's a lack of psychoeducation that allows people to understand mental illness and to get rid of the fallacies and get rid of the myths of mental health altogether. So a lot of this that happens is particularly with boys or girls being misdiagnosed or lack of diagnosis. It deals with the fact of how people look at mental health, period. And the fact of the matter, in the Black community itself, we're dismissive of that. So that's more of a demographic issue. And even now, it's a lot better now than it was years ago, but there's still strides that have to be had. So a lot of that behavior is culturally influenced by the fact of how we have been raised and and how our perception of mental illness was taught to us, as far as you seeking these services mean that you're crazy or you're out of your mind, and it doesn't necessarily mean it. It means that you have a condition that is hindering you from functioning at a higher level.
That's
And
true, because we're
and that's
pushing.
yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
because we're pushing the because it used to be, if you was weird, you was like Lily cast out. So now the positive motto is like weird is the new norm now.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely agree with that.
So when I look at observation of girls and boys, and I'm gonna be honest, most of the autistic children that I saw were actually boys. They were not girls. I had a few. There were more. I would say it was probably 70% boys and 30% girls.
Hmm.
For the most part, they were mostly boys. They were not girls. So I do think that there is a legitimate concern about maybe girls not being, as far as the awareness of the behavior of girls, in a sense, that may exhibit it, but see that because the girls are maybe not more, the behaviors are not aggressively apparent, where it grasps your attention, and because the boys are more aggressive, it tends to have your attention. There's a sense of, I would say, apathy, but a sense of just not thinking there's a problem, and thinking that, like she said, oh, she's just thinking, or she's just in her own world, or saying things like that, and you're not necessarily giving them the attention that they need.
Yeah. So what? Okay. So that's to kind of go back to what we were saying earlier about. So it's kind of less if the woman or the female has less signs showing it, not doesn't necessarily mean it's not there.
Right.
So
Can I
Yes.
say something really quickly?
yeah, go
Because,
ahead.
okay, so a lot of neurotypical people, or just people who don't have a particular disorder, when they're evaluating people who do have the disorder, they're normally evaluating it based on observable behavior or how someone makes them feel, right? So, for example, if you were observing a young boy versus a young girl who are both level 1, so that's like high functioning autistic, right? You would probably more likely notice the symptoms from the young boy, right? And the reason why you would notice is not even necessarily because some of the behavior, they tend to be a little bit more loneristic, right? Because girls and boys socialize differently at that age. And little boys put less importance on social play than little girls do. And I'm saying not just autistic boys, just boys in general. And so autistic girls tend to be surrounded by other girls who really care about social play. And so they will, in essence, act like mentors. They will say, hey, come, I'm going to lead you down the path of righteousness and tell you how to behave. And autistic girls desperately need that. I had one every year. And no matter how problematic I was, my first grade, I had one friend, Marley McPherson. Second grade, Katie Green. I could tell you all their names, right? Because it was just like the one person almost like took pity on me and was willing to look past some of the more abnormal or outrageous things that I did and look at the person within kind of thing. And then I'm going to teach you how to behave like a human. But boys don't tend to have that, nor do they have that necessity, because boys are okay with individualized play, right? And so because they're okay with individualized play, there's no one really coaching them. So from the outside looking in at these two kids, you would probably more likely notice the social behavior of the boy as being odd or awkward. And then he's going to do added things like not look you directly in the eye and so on and so forth. So when you're like, well, the girl's been taught to speak a little bit more in line with everyone else. She's been taught to socialize a little bit more in line with everybody else. So when she doesn't look you in the eye, it's just one little thing, right? It doesn't jump out at you. But what people don't recognize is that those two kids who are level 1 have the exact same internal mind, right? So they have the same functional experiences mentally, emotionally, physically, right? They are suffering in essence in the same way. It's just that the girls have learned much earlier than boys how to mask. And masking can come in a variety of ways. It can come in not stimming publicly. That would be great. But it also comes in learning how to do certain things. So like I'm really good at socially communicating with people when I'm happy. or when I'm normal. But this is the way I communicate no matter what. I'm not really great at communicating. I don't know how people do it. People communicate in ways to let people know they're upset at something, or they're sad about something, or they're happy and whatever. And I don't know how to communicate differently. I sound like this no matter what I'm feeling. Right. And because this is the thing that makes people really comfortable. And that's what you try to do. You try to learn how to make other people comfortable so you're not a problem, so you can fit in, so you can have friends, so you can stop failing socially, right? And so, but boys don't necessarily, because their play is different and because their socialization is different earlier, by the time they start really caring, that people don't kind of gravitate towards them, or kind of freaked out by them or whatever, they have no idea why, right? I knew the things that were wrong because I was being told constantly from the time I was 4, 5, 6 by my peers, right? But since boys don't get that same feedback, they're like 11, 12, 13. There's no way they got to 13 and no one on a teacher level, on a parent level noticed, right? Because no one is coaching them behind the parents' back, behind the adults' backs. So they're just going to stand out more and more like a sore thumb, and it's going to be more and more problematic for them, and that's normally how we end up sending kids for assessments and diagnoses to begin with, right? It's because they're having a pervasive problem socially, educationally, something. And we recognize there's enough of a problem that there might be something underlying this. Let's send them for an assessment, right? Whereas girls are less likely to start suffering to an extent that it's like, okay, I don't know what to do anymore, until teenagehood, because that's when there's a lot of extra social pressures. People stop wanting to baby their girlfriends and stuff like that. It's every man for themselves once you get to girl world in high school, right? And so that's when they tend to start really struggling, and that's when they start sticking out like a sore thumb. But again, girls are already socialized to kind of shut up, right? They're not socialized necessarily to make it in your face. They're more likely just quietly drop out of school at 15 or 16 or whatever. They're more likely to just quietly not show up for 150 days of the school year. And then when you're yelling at them in the office, they just don't really respond, right? They're just more likely to kind of be non-confrontational about it, to be really avoidant about it and whatever. Whereas boys are unlikely to even get to that level. But if they did, boys are a little bit more, as Deidre said, they're a little bit more, we'll say, aggressive, right? A little bit more in your face, a little bit more creating enough of a problem in your face that, again, you're going to notice as a teacher, as an administrator, there's something off here. We should do something about it. So
Deidre, so the men, the more aggressive, they're masking it.
On average, I'm gonna say, I'm not gonna say on every occurrence, but on average, because I don't want to look at things from a generalized standpoint.
No, that's fair. So
I'm
that's fair. I'm generalizing. So with that being said, so generally speaking, so more aggressive, masking it. So does that mean Myron Gang, that's a homosexual? Does that mean that he's masking his autistic behaviors? Because he was, a lot of clips, he's been very emotional and very aggressive. I know I'm just generalizing with him.
I have no idea who you're talking about, so I can't really make that determination. I don't.
That's fair. I had to shoot a petty shot at him. I just thought about him real quick. One point for me.
There's no, from what I know, there's no correlation between autism and sexuality. So I don't know how that.
Fair enough. I just had to throw a petty out there.
Myron is not autistic. He's just sexually frustrated, immature, and just a wounded soul himself that doesn't want to heal.
Oh, because he ain't getting no man butt yet. That's probably what the issue is. But that's a whole nother conversation.
He just misses his ex-boyfriend.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Come on now.
Okay.
That's a whole nother conversation. I apologize, Deidre.
But okay, I would agree with Celine in the chat. Celine
Yes.
is right in that autistic men do have a way harder time of dating, because men almost, even when they're boys, right, tend to hyper focus on attractiveness. So if you are beautiful or you've got the right assets, you're not going to have a super hard time dating. You're just not. If you're a girl, right? But as a guy, there's a lot more to it than that, right? When you're younger, you don't really have money, so therefore what you're going to need to rely on is swag or social currency. And if you're autistic, you likely have little to none.
Now. I'm gonna be honest with you. Most of the adult males that I had that mostly autistic, they didn't have a lot of interest in dating. Period.
What ages was these? The ones
I'm saying between 18 to maybe 30.
Really?
Yeah, they didn't have a lot of interest in dating. They were not very sociable people. Period. I've never met anybody with autism that was highly sociable, even the mild ones. They
there's
all were,
multiple TV shows of real autistic people who
yeah,
are
I know
really
that.
dating. Love on the Spectrum.
Wait, I get that. I know that, but I'm just saying on average, most autistic people that I've seen, they're not sociable people. They're
I gotta
not.
go to therapy because bro.
I'm just gonna be
I'm not
honest with you.
yeah,
I'm not saying that there's not cases of someone autistic being highly, but then on average they're not. I'm just going to be honest with you. They're not. They're not going to be on. And I know we had a little argument about they're not coming on YouTube to do these things. They may like watching things. They may be stimulated sensory wise to look at things, in different electronic devices and stuff. But they're not going to have a tendency to attract social situations on average.
That's like saying introverted people because they're not sociable, don't want to have relationships.
Unfortunately, I'm not saying it's to trigger you. I'm not trying to trigger you. I'm stating
you're not triggering me. It's just the most ridiculous.
But you're interrupting me. You're interrupting me. On average, great pill. I'm gonna say this wholeheartedly. I have counseled as far as most of them were all men. Okay, that were as far as adults with autism that had mild forms of autism. They could work. Okay, some of them tried to go to school and things like that. That they were not people who were putting themselves into social situations wanting to be. They preferred to be by themselves on average.
What about
they were not, feeling a lack of discomfort because they were not having a bunch of friends, even though they would like to have people that they could connect to and do things with, but they shied away from extreme social situations. They talked about this a lot in therapy, as far as wishing to have better levels of social interaction to get rid of some of the anxiety. And I understand as having autism, there's certain symptomology that affects that, but they're not in a sense in which they are drawn to social interaction. And listen, you can disagree, but
I was going to ask you, what about
you're speaking the problem, Ruby? When we talked about autism, I'm speaking of autism. I'm not speaking of myself. A lot of this situation, you're losing credibility because you're speaking more of yourself.
Well, I already made it really clear I'm speaking about myself, but I'm also speaking in general terms.
You're speaking of yourself.
In general terms,
you're not speaking in general terms.
In general terms,
you're speaking in anecdotal, your own experience, your own experience.
Right. In general terms, though, what is the difference, or is there no difference to you between not finding social situations enjoyable and wanting to avoid a social situation? How is that the same to you as not wanting love or sex from an individual mate?
I don't know what you're talking about, because you're talking about two different things. I'm speaking on autism spectrum disorder.
You said they don't date because they don't want to be social.
I didn't say they don't date. I said many of them did not have the interest.
Right. So you said they don't have the interest because they're not sociable people. Okay. So what I'm asking you.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. See,
okay. What did you say?
I'm speaking in clinical, very clinical,
You're
objective. Yes, I'm very. I can show you degrees. I can show you the licenses. I can show you everything.
You're not speaking in clinical terms.
Listen. I am speaking. You're speaking from an emotional standpoint. You're speaking from an emotional standpoint. That's driven by your own experience. What I did was I asked you a question of which you're still not answering. You like to talk in circles instead of just answering the question. So answer the question. Okay, sir. So as I was stating, when I have encountered adults, mostly with males, like I said, like 70% of my clients that were diagnosed with mild autism spectrum disorder, on the mild, as far as on the spectrum, the mild level, many of them were able to function, have jobs, and do things. Some of them did date, but on average, they did not have a strong interest or have an interest in dating. Not to say they wasn't attracted to females, not to say that or whatever their sexuality was, but they did not have a strong need to do that. I'm just stating that. That's just from my experience. I'm not saying that there are people who are diagnosed that want to do those things. And see, she's hearing what she wants to hear instead of hearing what I'm actually saying. And so I'm not here to paint everybody in a light. I'm just here specifically talking about over 15, 20 years of doing this and seeing. And look, I don't see a lot of kids with. I'm just gonna say it. Every year, I probably see maybe 3 or 4 kids or adults with autism. The only time I saw a large percentage of people, I had a contract with a home health agency for 2 years where I specifically saw kids that were on the severe, profound level that were nonverbal and they couldn't do a lot of things by themselves. Some of them were able to go to school; they were moderate, and I may have had a few that were on the mild level. Most of them were actually severe and profound. And so that's where I'm speaking of. I'm not speaking just on. I'm speaking of the totality of the levels that characterize the spectrum as a whole, and the differences as far as functionality. Okay. I'm looking at functionality as it involves how they perceive the world, how they socialize within the world, and how they try to become, in order for them to thrive, and implementing services to help them thrive. That's what we're looking at, because a lot of kids, they have issues. If they are verbal, they're not as verbal. Some of them are not as verbal than others. So, I'm not strictly looking at mild that can basically do a lot more things on average. But I'm doing you a disservice as a clinician to sit here and make these bold statements that are just not consistent with the DSM-5. I'm just not going to do that. I'm just not. But go ahead. Sir.
That's fair enough. So, just the differences between the social cues and the awareness between the men and women. So, would it be safe to say for parents to look more closely to their daughters than the males, since the males has showing more signs of or it could be more signs
apparent.
Could be more shown. More apparent.
It would be more apparent. What I'm going to say to any parent, because typically I'm going to be honest with you, if someone was to ask me, because I've had people ask me questions about autism, okay, and as far as girls and boys, I don't see significant differences. Now, I'm speaking as a clinician because I guess my awareness is different. So when I see a kid that's diagnosed with autism as a female or a male, I see the same stuff.
Okay.
I see the same behaviors. It's just that the boys are physically stronger and they're a lot more aggressive. I see more aggression, more movement per se. Mm-hmm. Say for instance, and then she talked about an example of the girls are probably more likely to interact with other girls and so forth, and the boys are likely to stay by themselves. I've seen a little bit of both as it regards to that, but I'm not going to sit here and say that's absolutely correct 100% of the time.
Yeah, but that's just one example, though.
That's one example, and so. The danger of that when you start speaking from your own experience, because it mixes with your experience, and we're getting away from the fact that we got to look at the overall disorder as itself. And so the whole thing is that we want to be able to educate parents to look at their children, whether they're male or female, period, to be aware of behaviors that hinder their children from functioning. I'm not going to go into this whole thing about trying to genderize the illness itself.
Yeah,
I'm not doing that because that's not done professionally. That's not done professionally. I'm not going to do that on YouTube because I don't have those discussions with other professionals about autism in real life. I don't. So I'm not going to do it. But if people want to, if you want to point out, and I can kind of give you examples of some differences, I'd be more than happy to do that. But overall, I don't see significant differences. And I put the emphasis on significant because that's important.
No, that's fair because again, when doing the show now, I'm coming on my own English because I'm unaware of what it is, what's the levels to it, how to approach it, how do you tackle this? That's pretty much the conversation I'm introducing this overall. Yes. This is why I'm asking all the questions because I don't know everything. This is why I go out my way to invite the people for the conversations so we can have people from the outside say, you know what, let's have the conversation, even on a replay. People can engage and say, you know what, maybe I have it, maybe I don't. Is there other avenues I can take to look for it? Obviously, like, Ruby, and we all agree on, like, hey, an app is not 100% of the way to say, hey, you have it, but maybe there's something that can direct you to a more professional person that can give you the answers you need. You mentioned 15-30 minutes more. You even gave, like, other options. Hey, realistically, it would take longer than 15-30 minutes to give a real good observation to actually kind of pinpoint something on it. Also, hey, you know what? I'm big. I know a lot. Selective people don't like me when I say this word. I'm big on vetting. I'm big on vetting.
I agree.
Big on vetting. So even if also we're saying if we find that one person, hey, I might see him and me like, okay, this is a cool person. I feel comfortable with them. But you know what? I still got to check all the other flags. Maybe there's some reviews. There's some maybe some background I didn't see, some stones unturned. Then you know what? Let me go look for other 2 or 3 other 5. And out the 5, maybe I found the 2. Maybe somebody's closer. Maybe there's affordable. Maybe there's some Ruby said there's free in Canada. So there's all like type of level just to find the right one for you, and then we can take it from there. Ruby had sent the link, and I don't know what the link is about here.
Okay.
Oh, it's about autistic people in relationships. So what it's doing, because again, as I said, while I'm absolutely referencing myself as a personal example of things, right, to more humanize the subject for the people who are listening and observing, I'm a researcher. So what I don't go by is an individual clinician's admittedly limited experience because they're not specialized in this particular area.
20 years
Right? What I go
experience?
by,
That's
well,
not
you're
limited.
interrupting me. I didn't mean to trigger you, Leroy.
You didn't trigger me, but I don't have limited.
I just wanted to listen. You're interrupting, though, sir.
You're taking it personal, Ruby.
No, but you're interrupting, sir. And I just
okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Okay. So I'm a researcher, and so what I go by, right? I don't go by any individual's experience, including my own, actually. And there are times where I'll refer to how I deviate from the norm. Right. So what I go by actually is research and statistics, right? So when they do studies, right, to try to get a bigger picture of the generalized idea or conception of a particular thing, like autism and dating, that would be where I get my numbers from, right? And so you can actually see from the statistics from the research that has been accumulated, right, that like I think like 70 something, over 70% of autistic people are like in some type of romantic relationship. You have 50% or 30% of 30 to 50% depends on which one you're looking at, are interested in getting and staying married for a lifetime. I think 30% of autistic people are actually currently married. Many of the ones that are not married, though, except for those with, obviously pervasive developmental delay, many of them are actually expressing a desire, but it's more like a lack of access or ability to find somebody who wants to marry them, or because of their pervasive need for assistance, they often have some adult person who has some type of conservatorship over them or power of attorney over them, who can control whether or not they're allowed to date or they're allowed to marry. And those parents often, permanently infantilize their children, even though these are adult people who have adult interests now and adult desires and whatever, but they see their kid as a kid and, kind of prevent that from happening. And that's why shows like Love on the Spectrum are so important, actually, right? I mean, they're important to people like me. They're important to people like Celine, who has a social developmental disorder, she said, right? And the reason why these are important is because what it's doing is it's taking people other than level ones, right? Other than people who they can mostly kind of fit into society or whatever, right? Taking level 2 and level 3 people often, and it's showing you that no, not only do they desire love, do they desire commitment, do they desire sex and things like normal people, right? But that if you allow them, they'll pursue it. Right. And so, and that if you allow them, there are people who are, also somewhere, let's say somewhere in the neurodivergent realm, who are, hey, yeah, let's date, let's try this out, whatever. And so I think what it is for me, and why I think it's just so ridiculous to make statements about the desire of people who have these types of disorders is because on one side, right, you have most people with autism have their neurons are firing a lot, which means that they are overstimulated a lot, which means they don't like a lot of things that other people like touch for no reason, for example. But that doesn't mean that they don't desire touch ever, right? Normally it's under very specific situations and blah, blah, blah. And what they really desire is someone who can work with them, right? And this is what ends up happening is when they're given the opportunity, they find someone who can work with them, and then they can get the fulfillment because they do actually desire the fulfillment for the most part. That's what the research shows us, right? But have they had access to that? Have they had the ability to find it anywhere? Do they believe that they even can when everyone's telling them that if they can't act normal, if they can't act right, then they're never going to get it, especially men? No. So they might not be choosing to pursue it. They might not be in the moment where they're looking for a therapist right now at this moment. They might not be in the moment right now where they're looking for a wife or a husband or whatever, because probably that's why they're pursuing therapies, to become whole and happy and whatever. So that way they can then be ready to continue with the rest of their adult life. But it doesn't mean that on a whole, they don't desire those things. And the research tends to show us that they do.
All right, I'll let Derails respond. Then Wes has a question.
Okay. All I'm gonna say is that I never said that anybody didn't desire anything. I never stated that. I don't know what that monologue was all about. Again, it sounds like you're speaking from a place of trauma personally. And again, as I'm gonna state this, I'm looking at the autism spectrum disorder, all aspects of the disorder, how it presents itself, how it's analyzed, how it's treated, the observable behaviors. And of course, an adult with autism has the same desires as an adult without autism. They're human. But the problem is that in their functioning interaction, to get there, to get relationships and things, there's a lot of other things that, to me, just as their social cues and as far as them functioning, there are also issues as it relates to relationships are also just as difficult, or if not more. There are people who have autism, who have families, who have children and relationships. But the reality is that the majority, the research, she said that 70%, every autistic person that I've ever provided therapy for, none of them was married. None of them were married. Most of them could not make a lot of decisions by themselves. They needed assistance. She talked about conservatorship, which is something that I deal with a lot. So a lot of them lived in group homes, things of that sort, to independent living. I mean, I'm looking at the reality of that, but I'm not saying that there's not instances in which these people have a job, they have they're able to live and function just like anybody else. I never stated that, but I'm looking at as far as on occurrences. That's not the typical person that has autism. And she pointed out one research report. And the reason why I came up here, Grey Pill, is because this again, in the field of psychology, I'm looking at articles such as on the American Psychological Association, American Counseling, and particularly a recent article that I saw on Psychology Today as it relates to self-diagnosis, as also as it relates to autism. And they referenced TikTok. They talked about YouTube too, but they mainly referenced TikTok has been a refuge of people saying things and doing things that are not consistent with the DSM. I'm here just to speak on from what's consistent with the field. You can draw whatever the conclusions. Yes, I am just one clinician. Okay, I am one, but I also am a clinician who actually, I don't know if anybody else on this panel that has a license. I don't know anybody on this panel who has actually treated people with autism. So I have to stand on that. And I'm not saying that your perception and opinion doesn't matter. I never stated that. But all I'm saying is that, I've actually treated people with this illness. I've actually went out into their homes. I've went to schools. I've done all of these different things. And I have done great work, good work. And it is difficult work. It is not easy. It's not easy work. I'm just going to be honest. So I'm speaking from that place of reference. This is not personal. This is strictly clinical and professional. If you don't agree with it, if you don't agree with anything I say, Grey Pill, you can look up the research. You can go look at whatever you want. You can go ask another professional, particularly an ABA, someone that's licensed in ABA or certified in ABA, an ABA therapist.
I'm not a professional.
So forth.
Weird.
You are a researcher.
Which is a professional. In fact, I'm going for a PhD.
Okay.
So soon I will be more educated than you. So literally,
you don't know how educated I am.
I'm a professional in the exact same area, in the exact same arena.
I'm not going to get in an argument with you.
And a larger range of things.
Have you treated someone with autism? No, you haven't.
Actually, literally, I have. Literally,
How? With what license? What license do you have?
You do know that literally in order
what license do you have?
In order for you to get,
you know what? I don't know the rules in Canada.
Masters, you have to do your hours, right? I don't know the rules. You know that, right?
I don't know the rules.
You know that, right?
I don't know the rules in Canada. So excuse me if I don't know the rules in Canada.
Do you not know that? Okay.
Do you have a license?
You don't know that. So maybe you don't.
Do you have a license?
Do
you have I didn't say a person's unlicensed couldn't do things.
It's okay for you to not have all the information in the world, but for you,
I didn't say I did.
But for you to think,
you're coming off very sophomoric right now. You really are.
In psychology,
this is not personal.
When my education level is actually, well, it's a little bit higher than yours because you stopped at MA, right? And so if you don't seem to understand how that hierarchy of psychological education goes, I don't know what else to tell you. But I do know for sure, 100%, that the reason why I pursued this arena is so that way I could be way more deeply and way more completely, way more fully informed in all of these areas that they then expect us to go and treat people individually. So when I was doing my master's, right, and so I had to do my thesis, right, I don't know if you've ever had to write one of those or not, right, but I also had to do what? My clinical hours, right? Did you not know that you have to do clinical hours also? Because I did. Right. And so where did I do my clinical hours?
Under the supervision of a person that was licensed. Thank you. Yes. You can't do it independently. I can. So
under the supervision. Yes, but I did the treatment. Right?
Time out, because we got Wes got a hold on. Wes got a question. Wes got a question. Wes, go ahead with the question because I had two written up, and then there was something I was going to address before. Go ahead, Wes. And we're closing. My bad, Chaos. We're closing out, bro, because it's almost 2 hours. Gray Pill don't do long strokings here. We don't do long strokings. I don't care how good the Cash App is.
Mr. D. Durrell, I gave out my own theory earlier. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on it? Have you seen evidence or studies done on this, or have you had any? Yes.
I agree with you. I do agree that nutrition can have a huge effect. I was going to kind of go into some other things as it regards to some of the things they don't talk about autism as far as the causes. I do think that there are environmental causes, and I also think about nutrition and environmental causes that can contribute to someone developing autism, such as toxins in the air, pollutants, and also the fact of poor nutrition can contribute to that. Now, one of the more controversial potential causes was the fact that there was a huge issue in regards to immunization shots causing autism. And in the medical field and also in the psychological field, in the field of psychology, there was a lot of debate on that. And so whenever I talk to a doctor, you'll hear a doctor say, in a perspective of that's not true, the research doesn't say that. And then when you talk to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, they may say something different. Okay. So for myself and looking at it, you can see things that go both ways. Speaking to professionals, depending on who you're talking about, what they'll say. But I do agree that nutrition does have an influence as far as some of the outliers or the determinants that can contribute to autism. I do think that poor nutrition can contribute to that, particularly early in age, particularly between the ages of 1 to 3 or 4 years old. I think that can be a determinant of later on autism behavior. I agree with that.
You have anything else?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think that, and that's with any illness. I think that dietary practices have an influence on mental health. And actually, I just had a debate with a guy that was talking about herbal practices and herbal alternative medicines that can help people as an alternative to taking medications.
I'm pushing that. I'm pushing that heavily.
Yeah, and so my position is, it's an individual choice, consumer choice. From my perspective, you remember we talked about the vetting. I think that you have to even vet the person that is, doing the herbal treatment per se. And so you definitely want to make sure you have someone that's competent in that, because just like foods and things like that, your body can still respond in a negative or in a negative or uncomfortable manner to the foods, because those foods still have chemical properties that can affect it. So that's a little bit outside of my expertise, but I just wanted to bring that up because you're talking about the different things that can contribute to autism. And I do think that you can keep that in mind, but you also should be open to whatever alternative practices that can actually affect that in a positive way to help you function better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, 3 things down since it came up. If you don't mind, put your email in the private chat, because that's because I do it with women. I don't know why, because it's like a lot of ways to hunt down other people.
Okay.
I just got Discord. I have my Instagram. I think I just found your Instagram not too long ago.
Okay.
Email be better, but please email me the links you was talking about. Also, I think you mentioned a study about the autism food. Same thing, Ruby, when you get time. Also, the next question was, with all this being said, should we question everybody's behaviors now? Like, hey, this person act a little bit, I guess, not the social norm. So this person is maybe a red flag for autism. Is that fair to say? Or is this
I would, excuse me, I wouldn't question everybody, but I do think that if there are glaring, again, this is a disorder, and so you want to look at the behavior, but you got to look at how they're functioning, and is it causing a disruption in their life as it involves them functioning and interacting with others, or doing things to put themselves at risk or somebody else's life at risk in return. So typically, in most situations, Grey Pill, most kids are diagnosed with autism between the age of 3 years old and maybe 8 years old. It's usually found pretty early. And so as a person that has seen that, and the research shows most kids, when they're diagnosed pretty early. You know what I'm saying? Usually around kindergarten or maybe 2nd, 3rd grade for the most part. And so in understanding that, it's very difficult for me to see somebody telling me that they got diagnosed with autism as an adult when I'm like, what the hell happened in high school? What the hell happened in middle school?
That was my question, because I've recently seen one person that had me, just for me, because again, I don't know, so that's my ignorance. Was a red flag for me because they never mentioned this. Maybe I was ignorant to the point of their behaviors. Maybe I wasn't seeing something. I think Wes had said earlier before he came in, interview, and he recognized some sign that the boss didn't see, but he saw it, and the guy was like, "Whoa!" I had to apologize to another guest panelist. I was on some else platform, like he was just rocking. And pretty much it's pretty much like a verbal type combat thing, right? And I just went in for the jokes, and then the guy allowed me to do the jokes. And then 5 minutes later, another person like, "Hey, Grey Pill, he got autism." It's like, oh, I feel like a piece of shite, right? Right. And then another platform I was watching where a woman was just pretty much just bouncing, and she said, Ruby had educated me, and I was like, hey, that was her just stemming to kind of like get into motions, and she explained a little bit of it, just her creating a schedule for herself. So now at this point, because usually humans does it. So when they get a dive in or certain things, they'll be like, hey, is it me? Is it, you start looking at everybody else, you know? Right. So that's why I asked, like, should everybody question everybody on their behaviors, because just in the world we live in now, especially the structure, everybody's weird to everybody. If you if West saying a corny joke like, oh, this guy's odd, we had one time people in the chat with this, one time they was liking West, one time they hating West. So it's like, oh, does he have autism? I might have a personality of like, I might have the Darth Vader look as stoic as possible. Like, do I have it? So that's why I feel like, for the question, should everybody ask or just be wondered about it?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but this is what I want to avoid, and this is what we talk about in the field. You don't want to create a environment of someone being hyper vigilant of other people's behavior and assuming, oh, they showing this, that means it means that, because see, this is another thing that we didn't talk about that I think was very important. Usually a lot of kids who are diagnosed with mild or moderate autism, they probably have another behavioral disorder, such as ADHD or ADD. They may have major depression. They may have bipolar disorder. They may have an anxiety disorder that runs in conjunction with autism. This is very common. So if we want to talk about autism, I mean, we have to talk to it from full clinical extent. So if they are exhibiting certain behaviors, they may not be a cause of autism. It may be something of another illness that they have. It's just so happened they're a person with autism who also has generalized anxiety disorder. They may have, PTSD. They may have something else per se. So I'm as a clinician, and I came from a school of thought that you have to be very cautious of when you and take not labeling but diagnosing very serious. You just don't want to just randomly and just seamlessly just say, oh, this is that means this and that means that. You want to really take a close look at it, everything fitting within the realm of that diagnosis and the clinical features that qualify that person for that illness. And in most illnesses, you can have anywhere between 8, 9 to 12 or more features. And usually you're going to have at least half of those features on average, or a certain amount, is different per illness to qualify for that particular diagnosis. So you're not just looking at one symptom, you're looking at multiple symptoms that run conjunction with each other simultaneously at the same time. That's occurring within a scene at the same time. So you just not one symptom alone is not, well, one feature alone is not enough. You got to see multiple things going on that would make you question. So as a person to say you're looking at it, I would say look at multiple behaviors, not just one glaring behavior.
Okay, fair enough. Next question. Is it okay, and it's just pretty much for everybody overall, but
sure.
Is it okay to take all the stuff we're listening to now? Is it okay to take a person's word when they just say, hey, they are autistic?
I wouldn't take their word for it unless they told me they had a diagnosis from a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I wouldn't take their word for it.
Okay.
I wouldn't. And that was how I got in trouble, like doing the video about it, because to me, it wasn't alarming to me until I saw prominent psychological organizations talking about this being an increased occurrence of this going on that stemmed from social media. At first, I never even gave this a thought. Like 10 years ago, I probably would have never even, thought about this. And social media was very a large part of American culture. It's been a large part of American culture since like the 2000s per se. So, but I have educated myself and have read and seen various sides of it from different organizations and institutions that have now increased my awareness of people saying that they have a particular illness, and I can't take it for face value. I can only take it like, okay, they said it, but unless you can give me a detailed analysis of that process and that you saw a mental health provider, I'm going to assume it as an unofficial self-diagnosis. And I'm not thinking that you're lying, but as a person who has a license and I'm under a governing body, I can't operate like everybody else. Oh, okay, you got autism. So what? I can't sit here and say you got autism and then do a video and do stuff about autism. And let's say I compare the stuff that you stated, and then you go around and call my board that I diagnosed you with autism when you don't have it. That could be a potential strike on my license. Because
that's totally
Yeah.
understandable.
Yeah.
It's more of just like the regular Joe like myself. I come in just like, hey, I got autism.
I wouldn't accept it unless you know for a fact or they show proof that they're actually getting treated by a professional, or you see clinical documentation that supports that.
Okay, fair enough. All right, last question. Wes, do you have any comments, complaints, concerns, sir, before I get to the next question?
Well, you definitely talk exactly like a licensed clinician, meaning you know where to go and where not to go.
Right. For my protection. for my protection.
That's it, Wes. All right.
Thank you very much for coming on here and sharing your perspectives and experience with us.
Yeah.
All right, last question. It might get you in trouble, D. So all right, so last week, man, we had a conversation about alphas versus betas. At the very, very end, I was letting everybody know it was pretty much going to be a hand toss between the two. Because it's so weird on a lot of spaces that me and you pretty much are familiar with, that I hear like the pedophilia, and then I'm somewhere else where now it's like this whole lolicon thing, and it just blew my mind. That's a whole nother rabbit. So I'm like, okay, and then autism would just right there, just waving up. I'm like, so where are we gonna have the conversation? So I was introducing to the viewers, like, hey, you know what? Next week, which is this week, we're gonna go ahead and have the conversation about autism. Using the chat, at the end of the chat, you made a statement, which I believe was a statement. You can correct me if I'm wrong. You said people with autism should not be on YouTube. So can you clarify that? And what did you mean by that?
Okay. My memory serves me correct. I didn't say people with autism shouldn't be on YouTube. What I was stating that most people with autism don't typically go on YouTube as far as panels and interact. Again, we talk about social interaction and things of that. They usually don't. They usually, again, and I'm stating from my experience with seeing people with autism function in real life, they don't invite social interaction that easily. Not saying that all of them do that, but most of them don't. So when I said that, what I was pretty much trying to express, because I was typing fast because you were about to end, what I was meaning that most people with autism do not invite a social experience on a platform. Direct with other people where they're seen and they're heard and things of that sort. They don't do that in real life for the most part. Most don't. Not to say that some don't do it, but most don't. They typically like to be confined to people that they are comfortable with, people that they know every day. They like routine per se. They don't like change. They like consistency. And I'm sorry, like I have 2 autistic adults that attend my day program every day.
I might be autistic. I don't even know.
They do not. I'm gonna say this. Listen to me.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like when their routines are disrupted. They like to do certain amount of activity. They can be highly fixated on certain activities that they enjoy, and they're fine with doing those things and nothing else. I'm not saying that they don't have sexual urges. I'm not saying they don't see a woman they want to have sex with her and may walk and talk to them and things of that sort. I never hinted that. What I'm stating is that on average, a person with autism is not inviting social discourse with another person. Not to say they wouldn't do it. Not to say they wouldn't do it. Not to say they wouldn't function in the midst of that if they're thrown into it. Many that I know, they do not invite that type of interaction. They prefer to be in a more controlled where they know and are familiar with the people. You on social media, you don't know anybody. You don't know what's going to be said. You don't know who's going to say stuff to you. They struggle in those type of interactions. You know, I'm just stating on average. I'm speaking on average, and I'm not looking at the exception. And that's where people get confused because they want to hear what they want to hear instead of hearing what I'm actually saying. And so I get it. You can have your opinions and stuff, but I know that I've helped a lot of people that have this diagnosis, and I'm gonna go with what I know works and what really works. And I have receipts. I have receipts to back up what I'm doing.
All right, now none of the receipts, none of the YouTube jargon, no receipts.
I know, but I guess I have to do that because I'm stating because I kid you not, man. I got in trouble on my life. I did a video on autism, and don't you know, man, I had all these people from different autism sectors and stuff on. They came and they just ran.
Hey, that's part of media, man. I had a conversation.
So, but what they didn't expect is that I noticed, and so I went back and did a follow-up video that even made them more upset. But the fact of the matter, you cannot. I don't debate facts. I just present the facts. If you want to argue with the American Psychological Association, go argue with them. You're not arguing with me. You want to argue with other mental health institutions and organizations, because that's where my information comes from. My information is not going to come from your life experience. My information is not going to come because you got a parent group, a support group of other parents for autism, and you're basing it on the fact that we have parents for autism and we help these kids and all this other. And listen, I'm all for that and so on. But that doesn't mean that I'm not basing my professional opinion on that. I'm basing my professional on research, textbook knowledge, DSM-5. That's it, and my own clinical experience.
All right,
that's it. I'm not everything else. Yeah, you can say everything. I'm not trying to minimize anything. I'm just stating what I'm going to do, because as a licensed person, I'm seen in a different manner. I have to function on a different level. So it's your choice.
Yeah,
right?
fair enough.
Take it or leave it.
All right, fair enough. With that being said, sir,
it's been fun. It's been fun.
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation, man. Like always, that's what we do over here. Ruby, if you have anything to respond to that, or
to be fair, I was talking to Mr. Rube, so I'm not wholly sure.
Oh, that's fine. I was just pretty much just addressing from last week, because he made a statement saying, and this is what I'm quoting you, a truly diagnosed, not autistic. I'm saying narcissist. I don't know why. Leslie, you're in my brain right now.
ASD. You just say ASD. It's easy.
Okay. A truly ASD person wouldn't be on YouTube. Laugh emoji, laugh emoji, laugh emoji. He pretty much explains his reason for that. He addressed it pretty much most of the stuff he said earlier. That's pretty much got from there. We'll just leave it at final thought.
No, I'll say one thing about that, because the whole thing to begin with, and I told you guys once the call ended, or when the stream ended, I was like, no, D. Durrell is a clinician. That's why I find what he said there particularly egregious. And so I think it was like a couple of days later or whatever, we were in BMT's chat, and I said, that's what he said. I said, listen, I don't have everything he responded after that. When we were in BMT's chat, I'm like, I don't disagree with that, but that's not what you said. The thing that I am literally arguing against, and I patently disagree with, is the thing you said on Grey Pill. He's like, I didn't say that. Then he actually, and I have the screenshots of it, then he said he just didn't say it at all. And I'm like, well, maybe you just don't remember that that's what you said. So I'm sure that it's still in the chat. You could go back at the very end. You can take a look, right? Because I'm like, I'm not lying. There's no, first of all, as we were talking about autistic people and little white lies, we're not really great with that. But why would I lie? I'm not lying. I'm just telling you that that's the only thing that when you said that, I so ardently oppose you saying that. And in fact, we know that there are a lot of diagnosed, confirmed diagnosed people with autism, not the least of which some of them are quite tragic, like Chris Chan is a diagnosed autistic person. Right? Think Before You Sleep. That's a diagnosed autistic person. Brittany Venti is a diagnosed autistic person. Those are just people who are in another sphere. There are also obviously people who are diagnosed, professionally diagnosed.
Another one.
I never said no one was ever diagnosed clinically. I never stated that. Again, I don't know the argument that you're trying to make. You're hearing what you want to hear instead of hearing what I stated.
Well, see, the thing is that I know what I said, and then I know what you responded that day. And so that is, again, what I was ardently opposing.
But did you not? Did you? He asked me the question. Did I not answer the question, Gray Pill?
You can answer it all you want. I'm not arguing.
Yeah, she was just she's not arguing. She's just replying to her thing because I didn't know y'all was on.
We're familiar with you. But see, my thing when I stated that, I'm like, most people who are on autism, I'm saying most, are not jumping to come on social media to do content.
Again, I hear you, but that's whatever you.
I'm now giving my overall majority are not going to do that. They're not.
But this is now my answer.
Okay.
So regardless of whatever
you're speaking of my statement,
you had your opportunity to do that.
Okay.
So I'm going to clarify my position now.
Okay, go ahead.
And so again, what ends up happening actually, and if you go back in the annals of YouTube in particular, right, what you'll actually find is a large proportion of the popular YouTubers, the YouTubers that have gotten a significant following and whatever. There's actually significant, like way more, like disproportionately large amount of people who are professionally diagnosed as ASD who are actually YouTubers in particular. And so that actually tells you there's a reason for that though, right? And that's normally, again, you had your opportunity.
No, I'm just shaking I'm not saying nothing.
And so I'm now going to make my statements.
I'm listening.
You can, I don't, but it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is what I'm saying. So whatever you want to say, that's your opinion. I'm now outlining mine.
I'm listening to you. I'm just shaking my head, but I'm not being verbal. I'm shaking my head.
No,
you were shaking your head when I was talking. You were shaking your head when I was talking. What the?
No, I was talking about you.
Okay, go. I'm not saying anything, but go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So again, and normally, actually, it's interesting enough because if you listen to people's stories, whether they are YouTubers who speak specifically about ASD, or there are people who were just YouTubers before and got a diagnosis, years after they started their YouTube channels as young people or whatever. The reason why a lot of people start YouTube channels and then become really popular is because they start when they're a little bit younger, right? Like, so in their early teens, and they're very lonely people, right? They're not great at socializing. So they're basically failing on the social front, but they're desperate for socialization, right? They're desperate to be heard. They're desperate to, have that still human connection in a way that's kind of safe for them. And so they turn on the camera and they record themselves, and that actually allows them to get that fulfillment. And because they don't have outside social priorities, a lot of them, right, they can dedicate a lot of time and energy into building their channels, which is why they end up being able to grow to a much larger extent than people who are really busy in the middle of high school, socializing with all the friends, wanting to go to the mall all the time, wanting to go this, wanting to go here, wanting to go to parties and stuff, right? You have a lot of autistic kids who literally are not comfortable with a lot of aspects of socialization. They're really awkward, they're not really great at making friends, and so they're just and especially if they're not diagnosed, right, they don't even know why, they're just looking for a way to connect with people. And that's kind of like when YouTube and stuff like that started back then. It was a really great outlet, right? Now that's very different than, we'll say, TikTok, because that's not what TikTok is about. TikTok is about going viral. It's very easy to go viral on TikTok, right? You need to have something that's like 10 seconds long, that's shocking, that's, oh my God, that's whatever, right? And so people are not using TikTok as a mode to connect with people or to get that kind of social fulfillment. They're trying to get clout through TikTok, right? Whereas in YouTube is a completely different platform that has a completely different level of fulfillment that people are needing. And so actually I would shoot, I should have pulled that up. Well, you know what? I'll send it to you after the show because they actually have done a couple articles about this over the years, specifically kind of talking about that fulfillment and how there's a positive, but there's also a negative to it, right? And so I think that a lot of people's perceptions would be that like this counts as socialization. So remember that streaming wasn't really a thing initially, like the way it is now, and interacting on this back and forth kind of scale, which we do with the fourth wall, right? It used to be like you turn on your camera, you upload a video, that's what YouTube used to be. So you were kind of yelling into the void, right? And then people were saying stuff in the comments and stuff. And a lot of times when you have people like Chris Chan, right, that was giving him social validation for the first time in his life. And he, unfortunately, because of his inability to read social cues correctly and stuff like that, he wasn't able to read when he was being trolled. And that's why he was able to be so viciously trolled all of this time, right? And to the point where he was trolled into and convinced into thinking it would be cool for him to do stuff with his mom. Right. So it's kind of like there's a disturbing trend, unfortunately, with the people who are the most trolled and the most kind of taken advantage of online are often also autistic people. So there is a danger element there, but it can also be kind of like a safe way to explore yourself and socialization and grow. And so this is why I would and again, I'll look for the articles. I didn't pull them up. I should have. I've been sick, so yeah. But yeah, it's a really great thing for a lot of autistic people actually, and it's a place where a lot of autistic people were able to find community where they never were before. Because how do you find autistic people in the world? Just like wandering around outside. It's very difficult to do, especially if you're not great at reading social cues, right? And you're not really great at reading like people in general, let alone looking them in the eye and da 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 da. So it's kind of a great way when you find someone who is autistic online. Then it's like you find the sense of community and purpose and whatever. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
Fair enough. Right. So with that being said, so next Tuesday we are going to be discussing and talking about pedophilia / lolicon. What is one? We're just going to go ahead and knock out the Geppetto one out the way, and then so going to be some little homework on the lolicon situation, because that's a weird rabbit hole. So pretty much the question for next week going to be is what is it? How do you identify people that is or isn't on both sides, and then is it healthy or not healthy? So that's conversation going to have. Do you really want to welcome for that conversation for next week, Tuesday?
Sure.
Also, because I'm thinking about it now, because it's Wes above me. For the fans out there, the geek fans, the Marvel fans, okay, I will be reaching out to Classic Ruby because people was asking me about this before. Wes, since he yarns and he go to bed early, okay, we got to tuck Wes in, so that's why we're going on now. So Wednesday, I'm guessing Wednesday, maybe 7 or 8-ish Central Time, we will do an episode and talk about Echo. All right. I'm going to go ahead and be the jerk of the conversation because I'm just going to say it's trash. And then I'm going to diagnose everything from A to B because I watched it. I'm a hard critic when it comes to these Marvel shows versus the comics. So, so I'm going to try to reach out to Red Lipstick Vibes for Wednesday, 7 p.m. my time. That would be 8 p.m. West time, or 8 p.m. my time, which would be 9 p.m. West time. We'll run it like a 2-3 hours like normal. Because I was gonna go ahead and make it a midnight thing, West, and just go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs on Saturday. Trust and believe, Red Lipstick kicks me too about that late night thing. So I'm gonna shoot for Wednesday around that time. So that'll be your time if you're available for that next week, Wednesday. Anything else?
Is a TV show or a movie?
It's a TV show series. It's on crap.
Is it a cartoon or real people?
No, it's real people. It's live. It's based from a comic book. Yeah, so if you've seen Daredevil, so it's a whole little origin story of her, but she's pretty much badass. They actually got a little bit of the origins right, but the native part I'm cool with. So what does Marcus say? Because I know it's like some slicks. Marcus says, "Come on, GP, reach out to some of us in the chat about Marvel DC type stuff." Yeah, we're gonna do this. Yeah, thank you, Dantizi. It's next week, Wednesday, 7 p.m.
Marvel. Go ahead. Sorry.
So that's pretty much gonna be it. So next week, Wednesday for that. Next Tuesday for the group conversation. I'll make sure I have to reach out to people earlier. But I do appreciate the conversation because I think if more people on for this one, it'd have been. I didn't really expect it to be that tense, which I'm glad because a lot of stuff need to get out just for the understanding. So again, D. Durrell is only one person. Okay, he's only one man. He doesn't speak for all, just like we don't speak for all. That's pretty much how the Grey Pill work over here. Everything's by perspective. Okay, love us, hate us. We'll be here for another week and do it all over again for a different topic of conversation. Okay, if it's that going serious, just like real life, you know what? Once you leave out this office, go down the street somewhere else and find them. So
pretty much.
All right. So I appreciate everybody for coming on through. I appreciate everybody. And I will catch y'all later. I might do something in the morning. Who knows? I have a life.
All right.
I appreciate y'all.
Have a great day.
I know you're out there. I can feel you now. I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change. I don't know the future. I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin. I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.